at 4:35 and acknowledge that the District of Tofino operates within the territory of the Tla-o-qui-aht First Nation. A notice to attendees that the meeting is being video recorded and will be published on the District of Tofino's YouTube channel. Can I have a motion to adopt the agenda, please? Councillor Chalmers, seconded by Councillor Anderson. All those in favour? None opposed. A motion is carried. Do you have any public comment, Elise? I suspect not.
Mayor, no one has signed up.
Okay, so we'll go straight to presentations and reports. 2021-2025 draft financial plan. Verbal report from managers.
Thank you, Mayor and Council, and good evening. I'm going to start this evening's presentation. This is the second budget meeting for the 2021 to 2025 financial plan. I just wanted to take a moment and just to thank all the directors and managers for contributing to preparing today's materials, and particularly financial services staff for everything that they've done to make this meeting possible today. I know it's a great deal of work that goes into preparing for these meetings. The documents that have been included in today's council package include a detailed financial plan, which includes the general fund, the water, and the sewer fund, all of which will be presented on over today's meeting and tomorrow's meeting, which begins at 4:30 again. There are detailed project sheets which outline and provide more detailed information on some of those larger budget items, larger capital items. There is a summary of all of the projects, one for the 2021 budget in particular with funding sources, and then there's a consolidated project listing by funding source, so council and the community has the ability to have a look at the funding sources in total and to see what's coming from grants and taxation and so on. There's also a 2021 consolidated budget, which goes over the different service areas and consolidates all the line-by-line financial items in the detailed financial plan into one document, and I'll go over that in my financial officer's report tomorrow after council has had a chance to hear about all the projects that are being proposed in the financial plan. Today and tomorrow, we are presenting a balanced financial plan in the general fund, the water, and the sewer fund. We do have some modifications to make for this on these budgets between now and the time of adoption, and we'll go over what those next steps are to get to that position. Tonight, we plan on going through most of the service areas with the exception of infrastructure and public works. We'll see what time it is once we complete all the other service areas. And if the timing's looking good, we may begin the public works presentation. If not, that will carry on tomorrow starting at 4:30, and then that will be followed by my financial officer's report. So let's take our time this evening going through the presentation, and tomorrow please feel free to stop us along the way and ask questions. I know it's not the same format where we're all in the same room, so we will try to speak slowly, present slowly. Each manager, when it's their turn to present, will share their screen. So you'll have to give us a moment to transition between service areas. We'll stop sharing the screen after the presentation and then allow time for discussion before the next manager starts sharing their screen. So I will just take a moment here and begin the presentation and share my screen. Okay, so I'll provide an overview of what we'll discuss over today and tomorrow's meetings. I'll provide an update on the financial planning process and how we got to today's meeting. I'm also going to take this opportunity to provide some council with some information on the municipal and regional district tax and the resort municipality initiatives. Those are two funding sources and programs that come up quite frequently during the budget process, either from council or from the community. So I thought it was timely to provide some content and information on those before we get started on our budget discussions today. We will provide an update on our communications to date regarding the financial plan and where we will go from here in terms of public consultation. And then I'll pass it off to the managers to do the departmental presentations. And then I'll summarize the financial plan and focus on tax rates and provide some draft tax rates at tomorrow's meeting. So our first special budget meeting was last year on November 5th. At that time, it was a very high-level discussion. Each manager had the opportunity to present all the major proposed projects and budget items. And we worked between that budget meeting and today's budget meeting with the public consultation that we received back, which was presented to Council on January 12th, as well as gathering more information and content on the budget to present today and tomorrow's balanced financial plan to Council. I received the completed assessment roll in January of this year, and I've used that to prepare draft tax rates. As Council is aware, I am waiting for the revised assessment roll, which will finalize the assessment numbers for the year, and then we can finalize what our tax rates will be. Okay, so I will move on to a discussion regarding the municipal and regional district tax. As Council is aware, a renewal application is due this year by August 31st of 2021. The current MRDT term is 5 years and it's expiring on May 31st of 2022. The program requirements require us to submit a renewal application 9 months before the expiry of this term. And that's why it's due on August 31st. We will be required to submit a 5-year strategic business plan with this renewal application. As Council is aware, Tourism Tofino is going through the strategic planning process and consulting with stakeholders to work on a draft strategic business plan, which will be in front of Council in draft format and requires approval before submitting to the province. The tax regulation sets out what the authorized use of these MRDT funds are and the MRDT program. It's intended primarily to fund tourism marketing programs and projects. However, under special circumstances, we do have the ability to finance capital expenditures. And that's outside of affordable housing that is considered an eligible use as of recent. Some examples of capital expenditures has been the tourism or the visitor center, and then other infrastructure projects are allowable. However, they must be considered and included in and proposed in the 5-year strategic plan. All of the proposed capital spending items must demonstrate strong local stakeholder support in order to be an authorized use of MRDT funds. And those capital projects have to be completed within the 5-year planning term. So that next one would be from 2022 to 2027. As mentioned, the draft plan will be presented to Council. Council needs to give staff the authorization to submit the completed application prior to August 31st. So we do expect a couple times coming to Council to discuss the renewal application after today. So moving on to the Resort Municipality Initiative. This is often a funding source that comes up through the consultation process or during budget discussions as a possible use and replacement of property taxation. And for given the program requirements, that's very challenging to do. And so I thought it was a good opportunity to set the stage a little bit and explain and remind all of us what these funds can be used for so that we can have those discussions effectively throughout the financial planning process. This initiative is intended to assist small tourism-based municipalities like Tofino in order to support and increase visitation. Our municipality has to collect the MRDT in order to be eligible for RMI, and we currently do at 3%. The MRDT amount in the current year is used to determine and among other things in a formula to determine the RMI funding amount for the following year. There are several key outcomes for the program, and they must include the following, which is to increase resort activities and amenities, visitation, potentially private investment, employment in the community, contributions to the local economy, increase of municipal tax revenue, and diversification of the municipal tax base and revenue. Communities have to ensure that RMI-funded projects meet the following criteria in order to be eligible. The project has to have a direct connection to tourism. It must predominantly target or be used by visitors, not residents. And it has to be supported by the community, such as the stakeholders and the residents. The projects have to be within the spending limits, which I'll go over in a moment. And the program or project must not or should not be a general municipal expense. Those would be items like bylaw enforcement, regular operations and maintenance, those types of things. Ineligible projects are as follows. Projects that primarily benefit the community resident rather than the visitor. Projects that are part of regular community servicing, so policing, fire, water, and recreation, for example. Projects that primarily tourism marketing that can be undertaken under the MRDT program. So we have to work carefully under those two programs and make sure that we are spending the money as intended under the two program requirements. The project is not linked to, the project has to be linked to an aspect of the RMI program in order to be eligible. And if it's not supported by the stakeholders, it's considered ineligible. And you can't use the funds primarily for planning projects. So not just for design, for strategic planning or any other plans. It has to result in a project outside of the planning realm. So the current resort development strategy, which is a strategy that is developed in consultation with the stakeholders, is in place for 2019 to 2021. It identifies a long-term vision for the community and what it plans to do to achieve those RMI outcomes that we just talked about a moment ago. It outlines how RMI projects will align with the community's overall development goals, which are discussed through that consultation period. All projects do have to align with the spending parameters, which is in the next slide. And a copy of this presentation is going to form part of our consultation. So I've added a link on this slide for those that will be using it afterwards on our consultation platform, so they can have a look on our website for more information on RMI. So there's three categories that have spending limits attached to them. Tourism infrastructure, capital, and amenities must have a minimum of 70% spending over 3 years. Tourism programs, services, and events, a maximum of 30% over the 3 years. And program administration up to $10,000 per year. So that is my introduction to the financial plan presentation. I'm happy to just pause here and ask if there are any questions on that. And if not, I will be passing it off to the manager of financial services to go over the first part of the presentation.
Any questions for Nyla? Seeing none, I think we should carry on.
Okay, Laura, I pass it over to you.
Thank you, Nyla. Good evening, Mayor and Council. Thank you for your time today. I'll just take a brief moment here and share my screen. And can everybody see that okay?
Yes.
Perfect. Great. So I'm going to take some time to talk to you today about our communication strategy and the consultation periods that we've had thus far and moving forward. And then I'll talk to you a little bit about some of the departmental operating expenses and then pass it on to the manager of corporate services. So the purpose of our budget communications is to engage the community in the budget planning process. We want to increase awareness and understanding of how the tax dollars are allocated and the services provided through the district and upcoming projects or initiatives that will support council's strategic goals. And some of our communication objectives include increase confidence in responsible district management of tax dollars, increase awareness about how tax dollars are allocated, generate participation in the budget planning, support responsiveness to mitigate concerns and address issues. And we do have a number of tactics that we use to share and make information about the financial planning process accessible. We are holding our special budget meetings via Zoom in this online world. We have our online consultation We have stakeholder meetings as well as various advertising strategies here, newspaper ads, information on our website, sending out email blasts to our subscriber list, posts on our social media, and any statutory notices as required. All of our special budget meetings can be viewed on the District of Tofino YouTube channel and can be accessed through the website. And any questions throughout the entire financial planning process, questions and input can be sent to budget@tofino.ca, and this is an email that's monitored regularly by staff. We had our first public consultation back in 2020, and that was through the format of an online survey, which we have talked about before. It was available from mid-November through till early January, and we received 161 responses, which we were really happy to see. And we shared the summary of this feedback, as Nyla mentioned, at the January 12th regular council meeting. And there was quite a bit of communication that went out regarding this survey, email blasts through the mail subscription list, posts on social media. We had print ads in the Westerly News, and we sent out survey reminders in council highlight posts, as well as included links on the district's website. We will be having our second consultation period starting later this week after our meetings have been completed. And due to COVID-19, we are unable to meet in person. So we're going to be utilizing an online consultation platform. This will be accessible at talktofino.ca as of February 12th, so Friday, February the 12th, and that will be open through till Tuesday, February 23rd. And there's a few different tools that we'll have within that consultation platform, an opportunity for members of the community to ask questions about the planning process or any specific projects, opportunities to leave general comments and feedback. We'll have all of the financial plan documents that were included in today's agenda package, as well as videos of the presentations and information and frequently asked questions. And more information about this is going to be sent out through social media and our email subscription list in the coming days once all of the details are finalized. So I'm going to move on to presentations by service area, and I'll be presenting to you this evening about administration and financial services, as well as the Community Children's Center, and then I'll pass the presentation over to the next presenter. So this is not a complete list of revenue items that come in through administration, but these are some that help to support the entire organization, and these are numbers that we have presented before. So administration revenue is something that includes administration fees that come in from the water and sewer fund, and this is a calculation based on 5% of the fees that we collect. The Strategic Community Investment Fund is an amount that goes into general revenue that's used to minimize taxation. And we use the 2020 actual numbers with a 1% increase to get our 2021 budget amount. The Gas Tax Fund is based on 2020 actuals. And given the uncertainty from year to year, we don't project an increase in this amount. And there are two amounts that you'll see in the operating slides as we move through the presentation. And this is the COVID-19 Restart Grant, as well as amounts from surplus and reassignment. And these are two new items that are being introduced in the financial plan. And they are going to be used to cover a variety of items throughout the various service areas. And we will talk about that throughout the presentation, but there will be an overview and a more detailed explanation of these two funding sources in the financial officer's report tomorrow. So within administration, we have a small amount coming from the COVID-19 Restart Grant, and that's to fund some protective equipment for the election employees. And we are using surplus funds being brought in here for the service level review, union negotiations, and wages. So expenses within administration are things that include expenses that will support the entire organization. Within staffing expenses, this includes wages, benefits, training, and professional development expenses for administration, financial services, as well as corporate services. Within administration expenses, we have items that support the entire organization, as mentioned, such as property appraisals, our human resource contracts. This is where the service level review is located, legal fees, and audit fees. And these numbers also show costs for our municipal building and equipment, which includes computer equipment and software across the entire organization. There are quite a few transfers from the administration department as well. So to the reserve, we have the amounts that come in from the gas tax. We have the demand loan for the Tofino Housing Corporation. We also have the capital and infrastructure levy, which gets transferred to the capital works reserve. And at the moment, we do have amounts from reserves being used to fund the CNI levy in the years 2021 and 2022. And the financial officer will provide more details about that later on in the presentation. We also have transfers to the water and sewer operating funds, and that includes portions of the CNI levy collected as well as long-term debt servicing. So these are the anticipated revenues for the Community Children's Center, and we have increased our fees slightly since the last time we met, and this is because we were basing it on a previous average, and we're now basing our fees on the January 2021 enrollment. So that's increased from an average of $9,000 a month to $10,000. Due to the operational challenges of COVID-19, we currently have enrollment at the Children's Center capped to 12 children per day. And right now we're seeing an average enrollment of 9 children per day. So it does fluctuate depending on the day of the week. And we do continue to receive our EC wage enhancement funds as well as the operating grant funds from the provincial government. And we've reassigned some unused training budget here, as well as a use of surplus dollars to reduce the impact on taxation within this service area. And as you can see here, our expenses within this service area are staffing, office expensive, and administrative related expenses to operating the Children's Center. So we have the net from property taxation here quite a bit lower in 2021 with use of the surplus funds. So I'm going to stop sharing my screen now, and I am available for questions if there's any before we move on to corporate services.
Councillor Steer.
Yes, thank you, Laura. I just noted in the last slide with the Children's Center with this year from net taxation, but looking further out into the past 2022, it's approximately just over $100,000. And that is obviously going to be an ongoing concern in terms of that. That would be net from taxation, I'm assuming at that point, irregardless of any other fee increases or grant potential coming down the line. Is that accurate in my view?
Absolutely. Yep, that is. So that's what we're expecting to need from taxation to fund the operations at the center. And there is that big difference because we've included that high amount from surplus funds in this year. But given that we can't project what that's going to be in the future, we have it back up to its regular formula there in future years.
Great. Thank you.
Councillor Anderson.
Just to continue along that question, I'm wondering where those surpluses came from and sort of what percentage of surpluses that represents that's supporting the Children's Center this year.
I can speak to that.
Thank you, Nyla.
Yeah, Councillor Anderson. What has happened this year or in 2020 is that we received the COVID restart grants, and we also had higher than projected revenues in 2020. So because of both of those items, it resulted in a surplus in 2020. We have applied some of those COVID restart grants retroactively to some of our expenses where that grant was eligible in certain service areas. Not necessarily in the Children's Center, but what that did is it freed up some of the surplus funds, which we have far more flexibility with. So in order to help us balance the financial plan in 2021, we thought that it would be an appropriate use of funds to minimize taxation in some of the service areas where it would be possible, because we did see a surplus last year, and this is one of the areas where we felt as though we could apply some of those surplus funds.
Okay, thanks. The reason I'm asking, I was wondering if it was some project that we weren't able to complete that we'll have to fund again.
No.
From another way. So, okay, thanks.
Okay, seeing no more questions, let's move on. Thanks, Laura.
Thank you.
Okay, can everyone see my screen? Good, okay. Thank you, Laura, and thank you, Nyla. I'll be going through the corporate services budget, and much of the operating budget for corporate services was incorporated into the administration budget and expenses that were presented by the Manager of Financial Services. So thank you very much, Laura. This presentation, pardon me, will cover the council operating budget, as well as expenses related to elections. And then we have one project slide for council's review. So the council operating budget, since the last meeting on November 5th, we've made a few revisions to this operating budget, specifically in 2021, mostly related to COVID-19. However, it is impacted by the by-election. So on the screen, you'll see a summary of those changes, and they include that indemnities have been prorated for 3 councillors and 2 councillors and the mayor in 2021, because they will be starting their term in mid-March. We've also seen reductions to the volunteer and council open houses due to COVID-19, as well as a reduction in council travel budgets due to COVID-19 as well. And then there's just a breakdown of what is included in this service area, and that includes insurance and benefits, indemnities, council initiatives, grants, and council expenses. And noting in 2023, that would be the year after the general local election, we do see higher expenses due to strategic planning, training, laptop purchases, those type of things. I can pause if there's any questions about this slide. Okay, moving on to election expenses. We do budget over the full 5 years. However, you'll note that there are really just 2 years with major expenditures in them. That's this year with the by-election and 2022 with the general local election. For comparison, on your screen, you'll see the 2019 by-election budget, as well as the 2018 general local election budget. And a few changes have been made since those elections took place. So I'll just sort of run through that, why those numbers look a little bit different than what we're projecting for this year and next year's elections. We did amend the Tofino election procedures bylaw to provide for an extra in-person voting day, as well as mail-in ballots. So this year we engaged a consultant to help us develop the mail-in ballot process, the materials, and just really make sure that process goes smoothly our first time through. Happy to report it's going well. And then the difference between the two, we have a by-election and a general local election, and you can see there's a difference in the numbers there. And we typically hire fewer election staff for by-election We order a little bit less supplies, and then during a local election, we would also, or a general local election, we would also participate in regional training opportunities, and we hold candidate information sessions, as well as an extra voting day in addition to the advanced voting day. So that does increase the expenses, and then we do have to plan for the retirement of our voting machines, which are quite old technology, which may cost us some money in 2022 as well. If there aren't any questions about the expenditures, I'm just going to take a moment to refresh your memory. And this isn't really a budget related slide. It's really for your information. That's just a timely update of this project to let you know where we're at in the election cycle. If you didn't already know, if you're not following it closely like I am, you may recall that in December, the chief and deputy chief election officers were appointed. And then we held a nomination period between January 19th and 29th. We have 3 candidates for mayor and 7 for councillor. And now we are looking to our next step, which is preparing the mail-in ballots. So the applications will open next week on the 17th. People can make an application, they'll be reviewed by staff, and then we'll start getting those packages out the door as soon as possible to make sure that people have ample time to return them prior to general voting day on March 6th. And we anticipate that new council members would take office on March 16th or in and around that date. If there's any questions about this, I'm happy to answer those. Moving on to my last slide before I pass it on to the Manager of Protective Services. This is the only project in my department, and it is not something that has been presented yet in the 2021 budget process. However, Council might be familiar with some of the details. A website refresh was originally included in the 2020 financial plan at $30,000. And then it was subsequently removed after hearing from Council and the community that they'd like us to work with our existing website provider to make improvements as we can without doing a full refresh. So after hearing back from Council, we went to our website provider, which is a small provider who developed a custom CMS for the site in 2016. And after requesting several updates to both aesthetics as well as security, accessibility, and meeting the community's expectations, we were told that they are no longer able to meet our needs and would strongly encourage us to look elsewhere for service. So that is what we are doing now. And yeah, so really to summarize, this project went from a bit of wanted improvements to a required redevelopment of the website. And the budget included in your package is $41,000 with $35,000 in 2021 for the redesign. And then we've included an increase for hosting fees and support fees of $1,500 per year in the 5 years of the plan. And just to sort of round out the explanation for this new project, we haven't received any feedback yet, or we haven't solicited any feedback yet through the 2021 budget consultation process. However, public comments were received in 2020 when we presented it originally, and those included making contact information easier to find on the website, making the site mobile friendly, ensuring that meeting information is easy to find, making the webmaster local rather than contracting out. And it was also noted at the time that $30,000 was expensive for a want. So staff has definitely taken all of this feedback into consideration when planning the project for this year. And we intend to sort of address that public, and these are also some of Council's comments at the time, through a bunch of different strategies as we move the project forward. And that includes auditing the site content and organization prior to the new build to ensure that it's easy to move around the site, implementing internationally accepted standards for website accessibility. And these are just the new standards that should be implemented on any new, especially government website, ensuring mobile responsiveness and regular updates. That includes security updates. And then building using an open source content management system such as Drupal or WordPress. And I'm just noting one more time that this project has unfortunately moved from wanted improvements to necessary due to the loss of our current website provider. And we will be looking at strategies like using our in-house staff to migrate content onto the new site, cross-training interdepartmentally, and using the open source CMS to keep the project cost down in the short term and the long term so that we can maintain the site in-house as much as possible. happy to answer any questions. I know this is a new project in front of council. If there aren't any, I will stop sharing my screen and pass it on to the manager of protective services.
Okay, thanks, Elise.
Oh,
Oh, we have a question from Councillor Steer.
Yeah, thank you, Elise. And I just because this is not my area of expertise at all, just trying to understand in terms of the service provider that was providing the service no longer can support it. So the support that's necessary is, so the refurbishing or the redesign, does that make it so that it's serviceable by someone else because it was a custom build to begin with? And that's why we have to go to a complete refresh, as opposed to just finding someone who can better service the website?
You've hit on a few correct threads there. They're a little bit different though. So yes, we do have a custom CMS right now. So that's a proprietary custom content management system. So staff is able to mostly make the changes that were requested, but there are a few parts of the website that really require someone on the back end to be making those changes, and that's not available to a new provider. We can't just sort of switch providers using the same content of our site or using the same content management system of our site. We have to migrate to something new, and open source would be the recommended route for that. If you're not familiar with it, it means that other people in multiple different companies, I suppose, you could switch providers quite easily because they're all able to access that type of content management system and help you with the back end. So once we redesign it, we wouldn't be locked into a service provider. We can edit most of it ourselves. And if we wanted some extra help to make some bells and whistles or to integrate with something new, it's very easy to find someone who's able to do that on open source software.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thanks, Elise. If there's no more questions, let's move on.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. I'm just going to take a moment here and share my screen for protective services. Is anybody seeing the protective services slideshow there?
Yes.
Okay, excellent. So we're going to start out with the bylaw services revenue section. And for 2021, you'll see the bylaw violations. We've got that at 40,000. So you may recall from the last time we presented the budget, this has gone up significantly from that time. In the last portion of 2020, we had a substantial increase in payment of violations. So that has put us at about 40,000 for 2021, and then we've projected that out over the next 5 years with some increases there as well. Our bylaw or licenses and permits, this is primarily business license fees. And again, we're at 269 for 2021. As we move forward, we are anticipating an increase in the business license fees. And so that's why we see a significant jump from 2021 to 2022 and then onwards. COVID-19 restart grant, we've got 134,000 allocated there, and our desire, I believe, is to, if approved, put that towards the summer bylaw positions, so including the 2 reservist positions and the 2 summer bylaw staff. Previously, we've had 1 of each for the summers, but we have presented that we are looking to increase that for this year. And so the goal is to put that COVID restart grant money towards those positions. For staffing and office administration, so in this area here, This does include the contract and the contract and professional fees. So for instance, this does include the bylaw or the RCMP reservists into that category as well too. So for 2021 and 2022, you'll see that the rates are increased compared to the following 3 years. And that's because our goal is to have the additional RCMP reservist and the second summer bylaw staff for those 2 summer seasons, but hopefully not continuing them on into the future. So it increases for 2 years and then will decline again after that. Not much changes in the vehicle department for the bylaw area. And then when we move into some of the projects, so this is one that you have seen before, the duty officer vehicle for the fire department. And again, this one is, its primary purpose is trying to ensure we have enough seats for the number of firefighters that we do have, and minimizing the need to have firefighters using personal vehicles to attend fires and practices and training seminars. So again, currently we have an 18-seat capacity. And for instance, on the fire that we attended 2 weeks ago, we had over 20 firefighters turn out for that. So people were arriving in their personal vehicles. So this vehicle would be used on a regular basis for the daily duties of the fire department personnel. So for inspections, investigations, getting equipment serviced, and then it would also become the primary vehicle for out-of-town training, which would then help to reduce the overall travel costs of having firefighters taking personal vehicles out of town for training. And this would be the vehicle that would be used for that. Again, we've seen this one before. Also, it's the safety equipment, and this is to keep up with National Fire Protection Association and WorkSafe, and their increased requirements for being able to access buildings and having specific safety equipment for health and wellness of the firefighters. So again, this is some forcible entry tools, quick connect oxygen tanks, lights, safety harnesses, drying racks for the personal protective equipment, and some new sets of turnout gear. And we've discussed previously, our turnout gear has a 10-year lifespan on it. We do often exceed that, but every other year we try and purchase a few extra sets, and that's our replacement program that's been ongoing over the last number of years now. The Tofino Volunteer Emergency Response Building. This is that grant opportunity that we came to council with about 2 weeks ago. Again, the grant that we've applied for, the total cost was just over 5.3 million. The funding source primarily being via that grant, so 95% of that would be grant money, C&I levy for 1%, and then general surplus reserve for 4%. And again, that's the 10,000 square foot upgrade to the search and rescue and public works building, which would include a new fire hall that would house the fire department, emergency operations center, emergency social services, and the public works offices. And the relocation of that fire hall, or the current fire hall, would complement the future location of a fire training ground. But just as important, the additional public works offices would help support the development of the wastewater treatment plant and reduce the overall cost for that project as well. So fire services revenue, we have 2 fire service agreements currently. One is for Tla-o-qui-aht and Eto'o-ista. That agreement was formalized in 2019, and the current agreement does wrap up December 31st of this year, 2021. So we will be getting ready soon to have that contract renewed. The second one covers the Tinwis property, and that one's under review for this year as well too. So the Tla-o-qui-aht Eto'o-ista one is about 43,000. The Tinwis one covers the remainder of that. The Tinwis one is likely to increase this year because of the addition of the new housing units that are in there, and then the development of the new campground that's underway there as well. When we see the grants and donations spread out over the 2 years, that is the one for the COVID-19 resilience infrastructure stream, which if successful, that would be for the emergency response building. COVID-19 restart grant, when it comes to the fire department, just over $4,000. That has been used entirely for purchases of PPE. So our daily supplies for N95 masks, face shields, gloves, those sorts of things. And then a big chunk of that has been for the purchase of new coveralls, which we've been encouraged to use by the BC Fire Chiefs Association while attending medical calls, so that our fire turnout gear is not taken out of service because it's been contaminated. And with the fire services expenses, again, in this, the top line with staffing, that would include the new position that was recently approved for the fire hall for the training and inspections officer. That position has actually been posted, and interviewing will begin next week. So we're hoping to have that one filled by March 1st. Fire hall expenses, these are the general expenses that we have every year, replacement of a replacement of some of the windows, electrical upgrades, and those sorts of things with the aging building. And then if we go down to the fire vehicles, you'll see the increased expense this year. That's to account for the duty officer vehicle, if that is approved. And then that goes back down to 25,000 with minor increases year to year from there. That's about everything that I have to say from here. I'll stop sharing my screen at this point, and then if there's any questions, I'm happy to try and answer those the best I can before I turn you over to the Manager of Community Sustainability and Planning.
Thanks, Brent. Any questions for Chief Baker? Councillor Anderson first.
Hi. My question is about the, I guess, life of the fire truck that we seem to get not long ago, but we seem to have to replace them fairly quickly. Are we building a reserve for that as we go, or are we going to borrow money to replace it?
I'm going to turn that over to Nyla to assist with that one. We definitely have some time, close to 20 years, but Nyla can take it from there.
Sure, thank you. So we'll have the capital and infrastructure levy does include an amount that we are collecting on an annual basis for future replacement of the fire truck. The purchase that we made almost 5 years ago now was purchased half by way of an equipment lease through Municipal Finance Authority and half through reserve funds. So we'd likely look at something similar. The infrastructure levy does not mean that 100% of the funds will be there when an asset does need to be replaced. We sometimes will need to do a combination of debt servicing, use of those reserve funds, or not for this one in particular, but if grant funds are available as well, that could make up a component as well. So we are setting aside funds for future replacement.
Thank you.
Councillor Steer.
Yeah, I think I answered my own question. It was just in the fire hall servicing and maintenance part there, Chief Baker, you had projected, it was roughly, I think, 16,000. When we get the new fire hall, I know it was projected out over through into 2025. I suspect that that amount would change with the new, if the new fire hall proceeds. Otherwise, I suspect that's why you kept it in there, just in case the grant is not successful.
Yeah, absolutely. So it's a big if, and but yes, that's being prepared and planning for the future if we stay status quo. Yeah, there's definitely some ongoing work that needs to be done around here, so we tackle it piece by piece every year. But yes, you're correct. That's what we've done here.
Okay, thank
you. Chief Baker, I have a question about the duty officer vehicle. I don't have an issue with it. But I'm concerned about volunteers using their own vehicles. Will you now be banning that procedure? I know when I was in the fire department in Alberta, it was almost a hanging offence to show up in your own vehicle just for liability and insurance concerns.
Yeah, it's definitely a tricky one. Because of the nature of being volunteers, there's always the potential that somebody can't get out of work or can't get from where they are to the hall fast enough to be there for when the rest of the trucks depart. It's not a desired way to attend a call, and for all sorts of reasons. There's the liability, and then there's the potential of having contaminants in your own vehicle. So it will definitely be very frowned upon. And we just have to figure out a way to try and make sure that we have the best response possible when the trucks first leave the bay. And having the new apparatus that we do, which accommodates 8 people, it's a very good way to start out that way, because it just gives us a good assistance rate from the beginning. But it's certainly something that we have to look at managing and making sure that there's proper procedures and policies around that.
I can assure you our fire department in rural Alberta, the volunteers are a lot more spread out than people on a narrow peninsula. So I think you need to be making an effort in that.
Absolutely. It is just to put it into perspective, although I may only be 4 blocks away from the fire hall in the summertime, sometimes it can be 15 minutes just to get to the fire hall with the traffic. With the one way into town, it's something that has to be really considered and how we can best make use of that. So,
Okay, thanks, Chief Baker. Let's move on.
Thank you.
Aaron.
Hello, good evening, Mayor and Council. I'm just going to pull up the presentation here. Great. So today I'm going to be presenting 4 areas: planning, recreation, emergency preparedness, and recreation. I'm happy to take questions any way through the presentation, but it probably makes most sense for me to stop at the end of each of the 4 sections. So to begin with planning, we have a number of project sheets to present, and I think Council will be familiar with most of these. The first is the Forest and Tree Protection Bylaw. The budget request for this project has been reduced significantly, and that's in anticipation of potentially having a second planner, sort of a senior planner, long-range planner in place later this year. And the intent of this project is to develop a tree strategy and a tree bylaw. The bylaw and the strategy will support the policies in the 2021 official community plan. The zoning bylaw update, the long-awaited zoning bylaw update will be funded partly from taxation and partly from reserve funds. The budget request is $27,500. This project has been in the budget for a number of years, has been pushed forward while we waited for the OCP to be completed. Its intent is to take the OCP policy and make that policy happen on the ground. And so this project will be largely in-house. The $27,500 will be used for legal reviews and potentially some public consultation. Again, this would be supported by the new planning position. The Housing Needs Assessment 2021 is an early budget approval request. This is a project that's legislatively required for all municipalities in the province. And so a housing needs assessment report needs to be completed by April of 2022. This project has a fairly large number of $82,000 associated with it, and that's due to the fact that at this point it's going to be a regional plan, including the Alberni-Tla-o-qui-aht Regional District, the District of Tk'nowledge. And so in terms of the funding breakdown, the grant funding will cover 37% of it. Contributions from Tk'nowledge and the ACRD will be 39%. Affordable Housing Reserve, the district's Affordable Housing Reserve will contribute 9%, leaving 15% funded from taxation. And I also wanted to add this ongoing conversation about this project with the Alberni-Clackatt Regional District. Recently, the Tla-o-qui-aht and cknowledged First Nations were both successful in receiving the grant funding from UBCM that Tla-o-qui-aht Tofino and the ACRD had also received. And so we have a meeting tomorrow to try to bring those two communities on board and develop quite a larger regional project in the model of the land use analysis study, which is nearing completion. We're also in conversations with the Tla-o-qui-aht First Nation about being involved in the project as well. They are not a treaty nation at this time, and so the conversation is a little bit different, but the early conversations have been positive and still working towards hoping to include them in this project as well. I'm just going to shift, I can't see that. In terms of planning revenue, we can see our development revenue. You can't see 2020, but it jumped significantly from 2020 due to adjustment to the land use and fees bylaw that council considered at our last meeting. The intent of those fee increases was to more accurately reflect the amount of staff time being spent on development-driven applications, and is intended to fund planner one position to about 90%. And so that's a fairly significant jump from 2020. The reserve transfers we can see here are due to the, I'm just gonna pull my notes here, the zoning bylaw, and then the $62,000 is from the housing needs and assessment funds. There's a COVID restart grant, 3766, and that's due to the adoption of the Bang the Table software in late 2020 to support the OCP. Other than that, so see our revenues stays generally the same over the following 4 years. In terms of expenses, we can see a number of projects happening in 2021, including the OCP, housing needs assessment, floodplain update, zoning, and the tree bylaws. In 2022, we have OCP monitoring and orthophotos. We take a breather in 2023 and then get back at it in 2024 with OCP reporting, a potential integrated community sustainability plan update. Some of these numbers may come down once we have a long range planner in place, as some of this work may be able to be transferred to that position rather than using consultants. And then in 2025, what we see there is actually an update of the current OCP. Again, trying to get that OCP on a 5-year sort of rotation and not letting it drift into the 10-year mark. I think that would be enough for that slide. And recreation. So happy to take any questions on the planning slides or the planning projects or anything to do with planning.
Any questions for Aaron?
Acting Mayor, I don't know if you can see your screen or not.
Go ahead, Councillor Steer.
Thank you. Appreciate it, Aaron. I just had a quick question on the forest and tree protection strategy and bylaw. I can't fully support. I just had one question. In the project description, you talk about the budget amount may change depending on council's decisions. Could you maybe elaborate a little bit on that, please? So
I think what I meant to say, or if I hadn't said it clearly, is that originally I believe this budget was, I have to pull this off the top of my head, but $40,000. We've reduced that to $10,000 in this iteration of the plan, on the expectation that if the senior planner position is approved, which is was introduced to council at the last budget meeting, that we would be able to do a lot of this work in-house and not require the consultant horsepower, which was contributing to the higher cost.
Yeah, thank you.
I'm not hearing any other questions, and I've only got my screen on the small shot, so all I see is Councillor Steer. So I'm going to continue on with community sustainability and the recreation department. So starting again with our project sheets, there's this slide and the following slide have to do with upgrades at the community hall. The intent, both of these projects would come fully from taxation, and at this time, we have not identified any grants that may support this so far. The budget breakdown for this project spread out over the 5 years. The first year, which would be this year, we would upgrade the hydro service at the building to support future upgrades and any future development at the site, including a potential recreation facility sometime in the next decade. Washroom upgrades, developing external storage. At this time, we're dealing with storage issues, even with the brand new storage area that we built a number of years ago. We're already running into storage usage again. And then following that, potentially the addition of a portable trailer to provide an additional indoor covered recreation space. The second upgrade to the hall would be the community hall kitchen upgrades, and I think this is one that many councils will be familiar with. It's been on the budget for a number of years. In this iteration, it would start in 2023, upgrading the sort of the exhaust fan area, which is required before we can do the other items. Then in the second phase, upgrade the sinks and the aisle and the dishwasher, and then replacing the cabinets and countertops. This again would be fully funded from taxation. I should also note in relation to these two slides is the facility itself. And I think perhaps Mr. Work will be talking about this in his presentation, but we're looking at a facility assessment occurring in the next 2 weeks that should provide us with more information about the overall condition of the building and other necessary maintenance or upgrades required. The Recreation Strategic Plan would be fully funded from taxation. Is the sister plan to the Parks Strategic Plan. The intent is to sort of lay out a course for recreation over the next 10 years in line with the official community plan, the ICSP and council strategic plans. And then in terms of revenue, we can see our miscellaneous revenue is flat over the next 5 years, as well as our recreation van revenue. The program revenue basically is even over those years as well. And then our COVID-19 Restart Grant is in 2021 to support the wages and benefits for the recreation programmer one. In terms of expenses, again, everything stays fairly flat throughout with small increases per year in staffing, office administration. Recreation van has a number of jumps to deal with things like new tires and inspections. Our program expenses change from 2021 to 2022, largely as a result. Let me just pull this out here. Expenses. Largely result of our arts and cultures program. So in 2021, we're not offering choir at this time, and choir is one of our big arts and culture recreations. So you can see we don't have those expenses in 2021, but in 2022, we'd expect those expenses to come back. And then finally, that gym program expense is the funding that we provide to the Wickinush Community School Society to help support their programming for youth and adults at the community school. And so there we can see that then sort of net from property taxation over the next 5 years. Happy to take any questions on anything on recreation prior to getting into the emergency planning slides.
Any questions for Aaron? Hearing none, we should move on. Thanks, Aaron.
Thank you. Moving on. So emergency planning. Again, with the project sheets. The first project is a project that's been moved forward from 2020 to 2021, and this is a community recovery framework. In essence, this is a legislative requirement to develop a recovery frameworks, which would be basically a how-to develop a response recovery plans from emergencies. Also required to be eligible for DFA or disaster financial assistance. Our emergency program coordinator is in conversations with the province about exactly what this might want to look like. It's still a moving target, but we hope to have it completed by the end of this year. The second project sheet is the Tsunami Siren 4. I think all of council is and mayor familiar with this project. We identified Mackenzie Beach through reviewing the coastal flood risk assessment, a survey, best practice, and also the map developed in 2006 by Federal Signals. Further on in the slides, we'll talk about Tsunami 5 and some other tsunami siren. The Emergency Program Strategic Plan 2022. This would occur next year, and the intent of this plan would be to develop a 5-year plan to help direct resources and efforts over the next 5 years, and that would be developed in consultation with our emergency program committees. The vertical evacuation project is slowly underway. This project will be funded from donation and conditional grants from the province. At this point, there are no taxation dollars associated with this. There is a project sheet that was not included in this presentation, but may come to council at the next project, which is in relation to this grant, but a separate a portion of this project, but a separate grant. And that grant is related to developing a probabilistic tsunami and earthquake model, which we need to develop to further develop the evacuation plan. And so that grant is about $500,000. We've made it past the first step of that, and we're waiting to hear about the second, whether we've been approved or not. Again, this project would be the consideration of a vertical evacuation tower or facility at Chesterman Beach. And there's still the other work that we're looking at is making sure that location could is basically ground proofing the concept. So whether the geotechnical information is accurate, to making sure that we know what we're building for, and that would relate back to the probabilistic study. Making sure that it's accessible by the community, and talking to obviously the community around the tower and also the wider community. So this is a long way to go, but we wanted to make sure that it was in the budget and council was aware of it. Tsunami Siren 5, again with our Tsunami Siren program, we plan 3 years out, put money in a reserve account the 2 years prior, and then fund it in the 3rd year. The location for this siren is yet to be determined. What we're waiting for are 2 things. This year, we're going to look into developing a study based on that 2006 Federal Signal study to sort of ground truth that study now that we have sirens in place and we can do some actual on the ground testing. And we're also excited to be formalizing hopefully this year a partnership with the Tla-o-qui-aht First Nation to loop in their forthcoming siren at a pitsit. Great news, the Tla-o-qui-aht First Nation tested their first 2 sirens, I think it was last Friday, at Long Beach, one at Essaouista, one at Tla-o-qui-aht, and those both worked, and our emergency program coordinators working closely with them in that program. So excited about that. So this, we don't have a location for the siren yet. It may be that when we do the modeling and the surveys that we don't need a Tsunami Siren 5, or it may mean that we can locate it somewhere else other than the downtown, perhaps the inlet. So that's some stuff yet to be decided. So in terms of revenue, you can see the big increase in 2022, which is related to the vertical evacuation tower. I'm just going to pull my notes up here. The Tsunami Siren 5, we can see there in 2024. The conditional grants in 2021 are related to the EOC, ESS, and evacuation grants that we've applied for in years past. The COVID Restart Grant, I think council now is familiar with, and this was to support the wages of the emergency program coordinator for this year. And then we have that surplus reassignment of 2020 taxation of 8,500. In terms of expenses, in 2021, we can see a little bit of a jump in the building expenses, and that is related to the development of a new staircase at this building as a secondary egress. The transfer expenses are related to the development of the Tsunami Siren 4, and then all of the other EP projects total at 117. And there we can see revenue and expenses over the next 5 years. And that brings me to the end of the emergency planning. And I have 2 slides left for building inspection, but I'll pause here and take any questions.
Have any questions for Aaron? Hearing none, let's carry on, Aaron.
Thank you. Okay, for our final 2 slides, we have the building inspection revenue. The contract revenue in the top line is the revenue received from cknowledged providing building inspection services for that community. Over the next 3 years, we're going to wind down that service and bring that inspector fully back into Tofino. The transfer from a reserve revenue was to do with the funds coming to support the step code project. And then we can see our revenue is conservatively estimated in 2021 at $95,000. And then we can see the totals of the revenue at the bottom. You can see in the following years in the revenue line at 68,000. Again, we tend to budget very conservatively up until the year right before we develop the budgets. So in terms of expenses, we can see staffing and office administration costs in the first line item. The code consultant contractor in 2021 is 15,000 and 2022 is 8,000, and then it goes to $0. That's reflective of our building inspector increasing his level of building inspection services from level 1 to 2 to 3. I believe as of today, he's become eligible to start studying for the level 3, which is the highest level of building inspection, and excited for him, and also excited for us to be able to reduce some of our costs in that line. The vehicle expense is stay flat over those next 5 years, and then we can see our totals there. And you can see in that bottom line that net from property taxation is higher in 2022 to 2025 based on that conservative estimation of building inspection costs for those years. And that brings me to the end of my slides. And after any questions, I'll be handing over to Ms. Vermont.
Thanks, Aaron. Does council have any questions? Going once, going twice. Let's move on. Hi, April.
Hi, good evening, Mayor and Council. I'm just going to take a moment to share my screen. And I just want to confirm you're looking at the full screen version of the presentation.
No, I'm not. I see. Yeah. You need to go to full screen. I can see your notes.
Oh, that's awkward. Okay, let me see if I can go back here. New share.
There you go.
Perfect. Okay. So I think you probably already saw the first slide here, which is the cemetery improvements. And this was a maintenance project that was planned for 2020, but was deferred due to COVID-19 and budget efforts to reduce the budget for 2020 to reduce taxation. So this is coming back before council for 2021 and is essentially leveling out the ground at the cemetery to make maintenance of the area easier. The ground there is quite soft and the ground can become quite uneven, making mowing quite difficult. Seasonal shuttle service for 2021. Again, in 2020, we opted early in the year to cancel this service for 2020 due to COVID-19, challenges with operating the service, a lot of uncertainty about what the summer would look like. come summer, we were very busy and we really missed this service. Right now, we are planning to offer the service for the summer again. Again, there is some uncertainty, but we are carrying on now as if the service will take place in 2021 and continue to explore the option to have an electric bus service the route, which would be quieter, would be less emissions, and would be a really exciting thing for us to try here in Tofino. And so we're working with contractors to see if that can be in place for this year. Cox Bay washrooms for 2021. This would be at the Maltby Road location. There are washrooms currently at the 1431, or some people think of it as the, is it Cox Bay Beach Resort? I'm blanking. Cox Bay Beach Resort location that are quite well used. The services at the Maltby Road location are, it's quite underserviced, despite us, the district, expanding parking significantly there in 2018. There is a small washroom at the end of the trail close to the beach that you may remember as the Cox Bay Can that we worked with Surfrider on many years ago, but it's very small for the amount of traffic that area is getting. And so we would look to install something similar to what we see at other beach access locations at the parking lot, where most of the changing and showering and that type of thing seems to take place. This is funded by Resort Municipality Initiative funds, and it's a clear link to visitor services. So that is something we would like to see happen in 2021. Skate park repairs and resurfacing. So through this project, Council has been in dialogue with the skate community and with the Rec Commission. And while they're very supportive of this project, naturally, they're also eager to learn if this may be an opportunity to make some other improvements or updates to the park while a contractor is mobilized to the site. And so that's something that that staff is continuing to talk to stakeholders about. But what we are requesting early budget approval for is for the repairs and resurfacing, which would be funded through the CNI levy. And this would allow us to move on with the procurement aspect of this in the early part of the year. And we'd hope to do this work. It is a shutdown of the park for a length of time, several weeks. We'd like to do that before it's the sunny weather where people want to be using the facility. If there are there's additional work that we may want to do at the same time, staff will come back to council with that information at a later date. So today we are requesting early budget approval later on for the repair work itself. Multi-use path resurfacing. So continuing on our plan to redevelop the multi-use path up to current standards, a wider path, a smooth path with root guards. We had scheduled the Sharp Road to Hotel Z section for this year. The district has applied for a couple of grants for multi-use path redevelopment. One of them is the syrup grant, not the maple syrup type variety, but it's the Community Economic Recovery Infrastructure Program. And that grant may change this somewhat in that we may be able to do even more if successful. So we hope to know about that funding in the next couple of weeks. I did speak with the ministry today about timelines, and they're hoping to let folks know about that. And the project that was applied for was to do the Sharp Road Dolphin section all the way to north of Tree Frog Lane. So that we'd be able to do quite a bit more if we were able to get that grant funding. But either way, we would plan to do this section here, Sharp Road to Hotel Z. Tennis and basketball court upgrades and accessibility improvements. Council's heard about this project before. This would involve a planning phase later this year that would be funded by CNI levy, and a portion of the work that would be completed next year, which would be the actual construction to improve pedestrian access, connectivity to Neil Street, improve parking, replacing fencing, that type of thing. So we would hope to do a planning phase this year, likely in the fall, since we have quite a few projects on the go for this spring already. Parks and Trails Strategic Plan, Aaron spoke a little bit about this earlier, the recreation side of this plan. So the two plans would be done together. Staff understands that this is something council would like to see move forward quite quickly. With all of the projects that staff currently have on their plate, 2022 is realistically what we feel is the earliest that we can get to this piece of work. And that would be spread over 2 years. Multi-use path improvements. So this is future planning, which would be, of course, the first half of Hotel Z to Tree Frog that we spoke of earlier, but then the future work as well. And again, we're fortunate to have the multi-use path included in the current resort development strategy. And we're able to fund a substantial chunk of this work with RMI, which is a change from past years and welcome funding. Trail toilets. So again, this is a project that was approved in 2020. And while it wasn't deferred so much, it definitely slowed down due to COVID and travel challenges and just difficulty getting together with the other parties involved. And so this is for a trail at the south end of the a toilet, the urine diversion toilet, which is a memorable name. And you probably remember from last year's budget process, I think we had some colorful images online or available for comment. So the toilet is meant to be installed at remote locations and can be in place. It's sort of a step up from your average pit toilet, where it actually diverts the liquids away from the solids, and the toilet can stay in place for 10 to 20 years, depending on the level of use that it gets. And one of the projects that was formed sort of a key part of the resort development strategy was improvements to Tla-o-qui-aht's Big Tree Trail. And Tla-o-qui-aht was part of our group, the group that developed the resort development strategy, and improvements to that trail facility were something that was talked about a lot. And so we were able to partner with them to also see a toilet installed at the Big Tree Trail as well as the Tonquin Trail. And so that work would be done in tandem. And that the washrooms actually are already at the Public Works Yard and are just waiting for the water table to be lower so that we can install them in the spring. Campbell Street Phase 3. So what you're seeing here today, the budget amount only reflects the design that is underway right now. And in fact, we'll be going to public engagement on this project next week. We'll be using the new Talk Tofino link from the district website to engage with folks. And Erin and I actually had a couple of meetings with property owners in the area today. And for the most part, are very excited about the project. We are still looking at how to fund the capital aspect of the project. It would be substantially RMI, but of course, looking for other ways to fund the infrastructure as well. But by having this plan completed, we will be able to be ready for any grant opportunities that come our way. And again, that public engagement will be coming online on Monday, and we'll be sending something out to the community. So you'll definitely hear more about that soon. Cycling racks. This is for a couple of covered bike racks. I should have had that in the title, I suppose. But the district has installed a number of cycling racks over the past several years, mostly through downtown revitalization. So we've definitely added to the supply, but I'm sure we've all seen the overloaded cycling racks at the beaches. And certainly we want to encourage folks to take their bikes to the beach wherever possible, because it reduces, parking and congestion and that type of thing. So the higher level of amenity we're able to offer there makes it more appealing to ride your bike. And so we're looking at installing a couple of covered bike racks, one at Maltby Road, which would be installed in conjunction with the Cox Bay washroom installation, and one at North Chesterman Beach. And so those would be both funded through the Resort Municipality Initiative funding. Monks Point Park, this is the operating budget. We do have a small amount of revenue that comes in from rent that we receive from a caretaker that resides on site and provides a level of security and maintenance to the property. And what you're seeing here are operating expenses related to the upkeep of the building and grounds, as well as minor improvements to the site, such as painting, signage, that type of thing. They are older buildings, so they do come with some, let's call them plumbing quirks and general repair work that one would expect with some wood structures of this age. Parks, trails, expenses. These are the general expenses that one would expect related to the maintenance of community parks and public spaces, including things like playground upkeep, landscape materials, trail maintenance. That includes the multi-use path as well. So line painting, drainage improvements, repair of boardwalks, waste bins, crack repair, that type of thing. And that is funded by taxation. And you do see a little bit of a higher number here in 2022 and 2023. Where are we here? And that is related to the the master planning, the planning around parks, recreation, and facilities. And that's spread over 2 years. These are some other operating expenses. Some of these have been spoken to through project sheets already. One I want to just pull out here is cultural initiatives. Cultural initiatives is actually not funded by RMI like these other project areas are. Cultural initiatives is for, oh, I just skipped ahead there. Cultural projects that we can't reasonably tie to a visitor experience. So things like the Poet Laureate, the repair of the theater piano, that type of thing. So we just want to leave room in the budget for those type of things, those type of expenses that we do incur. And here are some other RMI expenses. Again, much of this has been spoken to already. Downtown vitalization, this is in the operating budget. We like to leave a little bit of room for the odd thing that comes up, benches, bike racks, and things like that downtown that are perhaps not part of a large revitalization project like Campbell Street or Main Street, that type of thing. So that brings me to the end of my presentation. I will stop sharing, and if anyone has any questions, I'm happy to answer.
Thanks, April. Any questions from council? Councillor Anderson.
Hi, April. A couple questions. I think we went over the basketball court improvements really quick. I wasn't sure, was that a resurfacing that was going to happen there?
So for the basketball and tennis courts, we want to do a bit of planning work in 2021 to look at what the needs are, do some design around increasing the or improving the pedestrian access from Neil Street. It's quite awkward to get into the courts. It's not accessible in any way if you had mobility challenges or anything like that. So that planning work will determine what the capital improvements to follow in 2022 actually are. They may improve resurfacing, they may not, depending on what that planning work determines.
Okay. I recall some public feedback about the surface, and I noticed that there's water pooling happening on the basketball courts, so they don't get used much in the winter time. So another question about basketball courts, has there ever been requests to cover that area? Did we ever look into that?
So that would be something we would look into through the planning phase. Covering the area, it does sound lovely for the rainy season. It would mean probably less sun during the sunny season. So I think it's a bit of a double-edged sword that way, but certainly something we would look at. Is it a removable cover or something that could be seasonal? Those are all things we'd explore through that planning work.
Okay. I have a feeling you'll get some feedback about parking on the Campbell Street upgrade. I'll leave that at that comment. And then you're probably aware, but there was some federal transportation funding that something like $3 billion a year for Canada, which I don't know what portion of that would trickle down to us, but we should be aware of that and take advantage of it wherever we can. And hopefully we can expand our shuttle or even bus service by utilizing some of that. That's it for me.
Thank you, Councillor Anderson.
So hi, April. I just a quick sort of comment. I think with the multi-use path resurfacing, and you spoke about that, and I love that within the project scope that we want to aggressively move forward with the resurfacing, and I 100% agree. And with this syrup grant, which kind of answered some of my questions, I was wondering, irregardless of the syrup grant, is there potential to move even further aggressively as we're resurfacing? And I know you got the budget set out for $432,000 for this year, and then subsequent years, I think it's roughly $200,000. Is there any room or movement that we can move even faster, irregardless of the syrup grant, or is that just something? I know that we did the long-term strategy for moving forward, but I agree 100% about moving forward aggressively. And I just didn't know if there's any room to manipulate within the funding structure.
Right now, our staff are doing our annual inspections on the multi-use path, and so they're going along and spray painting areas of root uplift and noting that, and making a formal report, and that's something we've been doing for the last couple of years. And certainly, we have some serious deterioration in a couple of areas. Obviously, the Jensen's Bay Hill, if you're familiar, is really bumpy. There are a few areas that are just north of Tree Frog that are quite bad as well. So some of those may be able to be addressed by patching. But what we've learned is that the patching, you're kind of just making more bumps for the future. So it's really a Band-Aid until you're able to really come along, put in a really good sub base. And we are looking at trying to widen the path wherever possible. So I'm hesitant to invest a significant amount in some of these sort of stopgap measures until we can really look at doing a comprehensive and thorough job that will last for a while, because we don't want to be back doing it again in 3 years and have sort of sunk that investment. But certainly there are some areas that I would agree can't wait, and we would look to do those through just our operating budget, patching, annual repairs, that type of thing.
Hi, April. First of all, reference to Councillor Anderson's comment about the federal funding for transportation. I think I just heard on the news about 2 hours ago, those funds aren't available till 2026.
Oof.
So might not be able to use them just yet. My question is with regard to the cycle racks.
Mm-hmm.
How big are they? In a sense, how many bicycles do you anticipate accommodating in each one?
So definitely looking for as many as possible. Looking for likely a very off-the-shelf cycle rack. There's lots of different types out there, but they would accommodate a large number of bikes. It's not, this is less about style, I would say, and more about function. But the structures themselves would hope to be, in keeping with the area, with the adjacent infrastructure, the washrooms and that type of thing, something West Coast-ish.
So for each structure, you'll be looking at 10 bikes or more?
I think so, yeah, at least.
Okay, I just think you might be a little light on your $40,000 if that's the case. That's my only comment.
Noted.
Okay. Is there any more questions for April? Okay, shall we move on?
Thank you.
Thanks, April.
Originally, we thought we wouldn't be able to get into Public Works, but it looks like Fraser's getting ready to present, so we will pass it over to him.
Should we just check with council how long they want to go tonight? And does everybody happy to go till 7:30 tonight, or would they like to finish a little bit earlier? Speak now if I ever hold your peace.
I think 7 would be about.
7?
Yeah.
Is that okay with everybody? Okay, let's go till 7 o'clock tonight and then thereabouts, and we'll continue after that tomorrow. Okay, Fraser.
All right, thanks, Acting Mayor McMaster. Good evening, Mayor and Council. I'm Fraser Work, the Director of Infrastructure and Public Works. I don't have a desk lamp, so sorry for this little solar array here and behind my head, but hopefully you can still see me okay. More importantly, though, the slides will come up here now, and I'll share my full screen, and then I'll walk through the presentation. In the Public Works section, I have 33 slides, and then we move on to the utilities areas after that. So I'll do my best to get through the Public Works stuff at least tonight, so then we can carry on tomorrow. So just bear with me here, please, if I just get this screen up, and then I'll go to the I'll go to full screen. Can I ask Mayor and Council if that's the full screen view?
It is.
Right. First time lucky. There you go. Okay. So starting with the easy stuff, I was going to start the process tonight with the discussion about pay parking and the introduction of the pay parking and permit program. That was a pretty weak attempt at humor there as we start this presentation. And there's 2 different slots here in my presentations that I'll go into a little bit more detailed slides about the programs. This particular area here, which has a few slides to review as far as what we're trying to achieve, and a bit of a review of the intent as well as public feedback and discussion items. And I'll also do the same when we get to the Mackenzie Beach Road project and talk about some updates there. I probably should have introduced with a little bit more detail before even flashing this slide in front of council But I did want to review with council that since the last time a lot of these slides have been in front of mayor and council, we have taken action to defer certain projects to the out years to reduce both risk about capacity to pull off projects within the 2021 fiscal, as well as under a bit of a magnifying glass about available funding and trying our best to reduce taxation without incurring undue risks in other areas. You'll also see from the financial plan now that there's a little bit more detail and comprehension of different projects in the out years, especially 2022 to 2025, as we build out some of our planning in that respect, especially in the water sewer parts of the budget. We've also intended to recover some of our gaps in maintenance in the 2021 and onwards, as well as recover some of our planning in advance of capital projects so that we make sure that we have good plans and solid estimates in the years prior to trying to actually get in the ground and do those construction projects, and not try to actually force a condition where we would have the planning and design as well as the implementation in the same year. And that's all in an effort to reduce risks overall. So I think with some of these slides, we may lose some of the discussion, the rich discussion opportunities if I was to actually go through pay parking and then keep going through the rest of my slides. So I will pause after the pay parking slides in case council wishes to jump on some questions there before going on to some of the other portfolio. But if mayor and council wishes me to keep proceeding, I'll definitely just take the cues and move as appropriate. So the summary of the project sheets before council here, which takes a 21 to 2025 look at the parking program, which is a combination of course, revenues as well as expenses. And council was briefed late in 2020 about our intent to move through planning as well as then capital investments in the early parts of 2021, so that we would be in a position to implement a certain portion of pay and permit parking in the 2021 financial year. As you'll see in the next slides that come, our intent here is to actually move a little bit more slowly and methodically through introduction of a first phase of pay parking at the beach locations, followed by the town locations and more parking management in different locations through the district. And the next slides will bring a little bit more detail and understanding to that comment. So council will remember us talking about why are we bringing this forward as a staff group for council's consideration. Everyone is familiar with the increased parking pressures across the district in many different shapes and forms and sizes, some of which are represented in the photographs on the right. The issue here is that we have a high level of competition for high value space, which is limited. It is in some respects a real estate problem where the current demand exceeds supply. And without adequate turnover, we often have people that cannot find parking or convenience to parking is hampered, and that brings all kinds of interesting abuse or informal parking that comes with different types of negative impacts or externalities. The list there bulleted under current issues is really a definition of the problem. And so I'll just read through that and review that for council as we start this discussion instead of slides. We see significant issues of public safety with respect to poor parking that may disrupt sight lines and visibility for different road users, both active transportation and vehicle transportation. We see that all over town at different locations. We of course see that when people linger in parking spots for very long times, that different people that would wish to visit those locations cannot get access to that and potentially circulate town or the area looking for more parking, which adds to different risks and third order effects like congestion and GHG emissions and noise and traffic circulating the town especially, which can be avoided with better parking management. In some cases, it reduces the experience, the satisfaction or the convenience of different residents or visitors. It could look that if it's poorly managed, that shines a negative light on what we've been able to achieve as a corporation. And it also does degrade the infrastructure. We see significant damage to ditches and subsequent inability to manage drainage and stormwater. We see that there's wear and tear on the different parking infrastructure that would be expected. And we're seeing in some cases that it might harm vegetation and different things that are on the edges of parking, both informal and formal parking spaces. I've already mentioned the traffic circulation issue. We also would wish to have a solid set of revenues that help us fund mobility programs, services, and infrastructure, whether that was what April was talking about before, which was our very important shuttle services and transit services. We have roads that are nearing the end of their lives, in some cases past end of life, that need expensive renewal. And we also have programs that, that would benefit from additional sources of funding. The overall system could be expensive to run and has expenses already, and we want to make sure that those are minimized wherever appropriate. And we also would search for opportunities to incentivize a shift to more sustainable mobility, whether that was transit, active transportation, or, well, I guess that's it. So active transportation means cycling and walking. So another sort of scene setting slide here before council is that parking is one of the mobility systems that we currently have, like roads and sidewalks, and in some cases searching for transit systems. And really what we want to do is improve the management of this high value real estate so we start to solve or ameliorate some of the problems I've listed before. The principles that staff have developed thus far when it comes to managing a parking system in the District of Tofino have been kind of honed down to this list, which is still a live list and up for improvements over the coming months while we continue to manage parking and continue to talk about it with stakeholders, the public and council. We believe that a user pay system is a fair and equitable system. We also want something that's simple to use and simple to manage. We want it to be convenient and fair. We want it to generate revenues overall, net positively. We want it to incent that shift to sustainable mobility, and we want to be able to afford a system and have it fit for purpose within the district. There are, of course, other attributes and characteristics we would hope for in any parking management system, but we've centered around those as the filter we run options and alternatives through in order to determine if they're attractive for us for implementation moving forward. Some of the issues that the public has raised, both with respect to budgetary feedback and input, as well as just normal traffic and communications from the public through the course of business over the year, especially, and even since I've been here. We have the problems that are noted by the public with a lack of turnover, congestion, the high intensity of those issues in the peak season. We have parking safety issues. We have the abuse of parking and poor parking, which adds potentially an aesthetic or other risks on other community users. We have the illegal camping and car camping issues, which in many cases is directly a parking issue. And we have a desire by the local residents to see at least a reduced fare, but a lot of intent to see free parking for locals as a benefit, having learned lessons from the past about what is deemed the appropriate rate of payment for people that use it the most and depend on it the most. The approach that we've developed thus far, and we're presenting in the budget as a series of expenses and potential revenue, is to invoke a few strategies. The first one not being about parking at all, but being about mobility overall. So in order to reduce demand, we want to shift people to other modes of transportation. And we're seeing some gains in this area, of course, through the hard work that's been already put forward to implement the bus shuttle programs and the work that's ongoing right now with BC Transit to get transit service. The MUP itself is a huge draw for active transportation and a mode shift to active transportation from the motor vehicle. And we're seeing whisper services and different ride hail or car share services in and around the community, including how the e-bike is sort of transforming the landscape with respect to cycling. So we are seeing some success in those areas to reduce overall demand for vehicle trips and subsequent parking requirements. And then when it comes to more central parking approaches, we have focused on taking action in the areas that we feel are the simplest, as well as some of the highest demands, and in some cases the cheapest to implement first. So we would recommend addressing beach parking as pay parking via both digital application and kiosk transactions, and implementing those in a series of beach locations, not unlike what we see currently in the adjacent federal park system. We would then seek to move into a little bit of the more complicated downtown area where we would be able to implement pay parking and change some of the time-based restrictions in the areas that remain not pay. And then we would want to look at some of the other locations and try to address what's the highest performance and highest and best use of those parking and the parking patterns and behaviors that happen, such as van dwelling and illegal parking in residential areas, and maybe restricting that more robustly, making sure that people that are visiting have access to those spots and can still park in those areas to support vacation rentals or just personal visitors. Making sure that offshore parking is delivering on its requirement for the offshore users to get access conveniently to their vehicles in the right areas. And there's other areas to look at when it comes to parking, like Industrial Way and some of the more industrial parking that supports industry and supports the economy. Those are a little bit different than the downtown and a little bit different than the beaches. And we would want to make progress on the downtown and the other locations after we felt like we had good systems in place at the beach locations. We want to make it simple, and that's just simple for the user, but also simple to administer, simple to understand, and simple to affect change. And we have agreed at the staff level that we want to direct revenues to local improvements to reduce the associated taxation and to be able for us to replace and renew infrastructure in a way that that provides the largest community benefit. I've sort of got ahead of myself a little bit, but why beaches first? I sort of mentioned that we have a high year-long and healthy demand at the beach locations. In some cases, they're simpler and a little bit less expensive than in town, and we would actually be able to use some of those improvements or some of the funds to implement improvements early, which in some cases they need quite significant overhauls at the parking locations. Surfaces need to be fixed. Delineation needs to be implemented, and the amenities need to be improved. So how will it work? The intent would be to introduce pay parking services at Maltby, Cox Bay 1431, South Chesterman, the Chesterman Beach Road, the Middles lot at the Lynn and Chesterman boundary, Lynn Road, this is moving north, North Chesterman lot, Tonquin Beach Road, and then Tonquin Park Road, excuse me, and then Mackenzie Beach area accessed by Hellison. And that I missed the bracketary comment there that the Lynn Road would include the Osprey Lane public right of way. The intent would be to introduce payment via kiosk as well as digital applications, and this would be by registration plate, as well as any passes that would be administered by the district to a user that used it seasonally or annually would also be on registration plate, so that enforcement technology could be most efficient by doing license plate recognition to make sure that we could enforce that quickly, efficiently, and robustly in the months where we were up and running. Annual passes are suggested to be made available for locals and potentially for just other high users. We will need to improve our infrastructure to make sure that the system is working and is set up for success. And like I said, enforcement would be intended to be via that license plate recognition, which is common in other areas. You may have seen it in action in different cities or districts, including Worcester. So the next steps recommended for council's consideration by staff would be that we would move forward with an RFP for the hardware, software, and the management of the parking transactions and parking installations. We would want to get some feedback from council at this time, and as well as we come forward with more information and more detail pertaining to the program, and would love to hear considerations and council inputs on whether they believe that the locals annual pass should be charged a nominal sort of administrative fee to make sure that there is still a value associated with that benefit, so that it gets used carefully and cleanly, and that we make sure that we can pay for the services associated with the administration of those passes. And that pass would again be tied to the registration and would have to be proved through either address, Tofino local address, or some other means administratively that hopefully would be easy, which would create a lineup of 2,000 people around the block of the municipal hall for several weeks on end. Maybe there's another pass that would be available to commercial users like the surf schools that could get a discounted pass that wasn't necessarily on the hourly rates, but on something that would incentivize them to not abuse the parking, but also that we would be charging for that access to that very high value real estate, as well as other users that frequent this area many times per year, or have it as a second home, or live down the road in Ucluelet. Those are some of the considerations that we've brought forward as staff. And And I think I would say that the current thinking at the staff level would be that these are all made available as part of the recipe for parking as the first phase, and we would continue to learn as we do and adjust as required. There is an intent, of course, to report back to council with a little bit more detail and comprehension on how this will work and how we would step through some of the other considerations in detail, and that would come with the result in RFP outcomes. So that's a bit of a snapshot and a bit of a sort of rough and ready tour of where staff is leaning towards moving forward on the parking system. The word permit here, just for clarification, really relates to where it won't necessarily be a pay management scheme, but it'll be a permit and an access management scheme. So you could imagine that the pass might be referred to as a permit. So whether you're a commercial operator and you wish to park as a surf school at the beach all the time, then you get a permit that allows you to do that. If you live on U-Wood as a resident of that area, and we want to restrict parking to only residents on that particular street, like other streets in Tofino, that would be via permit system, and that's really what the intent of that is. Not necessarily like you would need to go pay for a permit, but it would be a subscription, likely annual based, or with a couple of options to be convenient for the different user types. So that may be important to mention, and something that I haven't really talked about before. So on that note, Acting Mayor, I'll stop and pause and see if we want to discuss this, or if you'd like me to carry forward.
Okay, thank you. Any questions for Fraser before we move on? I'm sure this is going to be a contentious issue when we discuss it at council sometime in the future.
Yeah.
Councillor Steer.
I would like to just quickly, because I think we might lose the, as you pointed out, Acting Mayor McMaster, this is going to be an issue and moving forward. So I did have a couple of questions. First of all, I just wanted to thank Fraser for the quick presentation here, recognizing that more details to follow. And I do like the operating principles that you've started with, the reduction in demand, the value in manage, making it simple and directing those revenues. I did have just some quick overall questions about, talking about almost in a sense a phased approach to it, with starting in terms of the beach parking. And I'm curious as to if there is a timeline for those other locations, the downtown, and then the other asterisk was the other locations, starting with beach parking, monitoring it, and seeing for success. And then is there a time frame for moving to that larger more what I would call more problematic area of downtown in those other locations? I do have a follow-up question, but maybe just start with that one.
Through the Acting Mayor, thanks for the question, Councillor Steer. I can't see Bob's face currently on my little film reel here, but I'll hopefully, if Bob needs to stop me or jump in at any time, I would welcome that type of injection. The intent at this stage right now is to get the beach parking lot up and running in the 2021 peak season, for the peak season, in advance of the peak season. And we would be looking at solidifying our plans for the downtown. I think it's realistic to assume that we wouldn't be able to do such a thing until 2022 at the earliest. And I think the current thinking is that we would strive for a 2022 implementation of the downtown if we felt that we had a strong plan in place, that we had de-risked it appropriately, and that of course we had the council direction to do so.
Thank you. And then just to follow up around the big question that that has come up is often and the feedback was certainly very clear about annual passes for locals and how that and where I do agree that if we give things away free, they may not be valued as much. I'm just wondering as to when we look at instituting some form of fee for that annual pass and how it might be implemented. But The figure that was on the sheet, I believe it was $60 per year. Is that just a random number, or was that based on any sort of what there might be an administrative cost, as we've talked about before, for issuing that type of annual fee for local pass holders?
Through the mayor, the intent was to ensure that we had adequate coverage for what we anticipated would be the administrative workload or resource draw to administer some of those. We would seek to make that as most efficient and digitally oriented as possible. But we also know that there will be staff discussions and liaison with community about what information is required, and a bit of back and forth over the residents and the different kind of pass holders, as well as we wanted to make sure that the costs could be considered even reasonable or satisfactory to some of those that had voiced their concerns about having to pay anything at all. $5 a month seems maybe like a little bit less than $60 a year when you just say it out loud. And I think what we wanted to do was make a bit of a judgment call to strike a balance there, to come up with something that people felt was fair and reasonable. I know that's a personal thing, how people will judge that number, but that was the thinking behind it.
Great, thank you, Fraser.
Anyone else before I ask my question? Okay, Fraser, just on a personal note, I was surprised that Howard Drive wasn't included with Lynn Road and Osprey Lane, because I already see everybody parking down Howard Drive, trying to avoid the mess on Lynn Road, and especially the surf schools. Secondly, I look forward to the debate as to what is considered a local to get an annual pass. I think that's going to be quite contentious. And thirdly, I think we all know as soon as you institute paid parking, patterns are going to change, and we're going to push vehicles onto areas where there will be free parking. And fourthly, in your project sheet, you mentioned all your parking at the beach and seasonal parking downtown. Well, I'm not too sure I agree with that, but I think that will be up for debate at council.
Thanks, Acting Mayor McMaster. Those questions, I'll try to sift through those. So the Howard Drive was one of those streets that we had identified as a residential street that we wish to potentially protect with that kind of restriction. Although there is current demand down there when the North Chesterman parking lot is full, and that is the only beach that might be in play from a surf school and a surf tourism perspective. I think we have to be really cognizant, and I believe most people understand that if we're not careful and we don't manage those types of locations like Howard Drive, we will consistently chase the bad parking behaviors around town, and it's almost whack-a-mole type of behavior. So we have to make sure that we're smartly in front of some of those issues and we manage those appropriately. You also mentioned that patterns will change, and I think the hope would be that a street like Howard, which is very, very close to the high demand beach access at North Chesterman, potentially would have a little bit less of a draw when the parking turnover starts to increase and people start choosing other modes, and we start to get a little bit higher turnover rates because of the intent of the system is actually delivering on what it's supposed to do. So I think that's going to be a sensitive location that we'll have to carefully manage. I don't know if we'll knock it out of the park on the first go, but I think we have to be cognizant that Howard's right on the fringe, and we've talked about other fringe locations, especially as it pertains to downtown parking and adding pressures in those areas that haven't seen that yet. And we have to be mindful that different residents in different locations might be affected in new ways and ways that they don't welcome, and that we have to be quite astute as to how we're going to mitigate those things. The next question was the debate about the seasonal in the downtown was maybe I might have missed one there. I might have to come back, but that was a rich debate even internally at the staff level for sure about the seasonality, and I have less of a historical understanding of parking patterns because I'm growing up here in this COVID world. So while it's there's quite a few spots available every day right now, it's not necessarily a normal condition either. So we'll have to as we phase the approach here, I think that theme or that the decision on seasonality when it comes to downtown parking has to be revisited and discussed with a wider group. And can you help me with the second point after Howard? I think there was something I'm missing there.
Defining a local.
Oh, defining a local. Yeah, another source of a rich debate. And I think if we're not careful, we could burden ourselves with a bunch of admin there that becomes very intensive. And as Councillor Steer mentioned, $60 might not buy you that many hours of admin time. So I think we have to make sure that we potentially take some risks, but also try to avoid some risks with some smart questioning and smart process and smart systems. A lot of people come forward and they say it should be free for locals, and then I come up with a question in discussions, even if we're just having a bit of banter, what's a local? And then there's a bit of head scratching on how to define that. Say, oh, you have a permanent address, and I was like, well, I think there's a lot of locals that don't have their address on their license. There's a lot of locals that live here for many months of the year that have out of province plates and that kind of thing. So it does become a bit of a tangly endeavor. So we'll have to make sure that we try to steer clear of danger when we implement that solution. It won't be easy. Yeah, understood.
Yeah, I look forward to the debate. I think, you say you're being cognizant. I think you're dreaming, but we'll see as we move on. Okay, if there's no further questions on parking, Fraser, I think we should move on.
Sorry, Mayor McMaster, do you not have us all on your screen? Both
No.
Councillor Anderson and I have had our hands raised.
Okay.
I just have a quick question for you, Fraser. Thank you for this. I was just surprised that in the revenue redirection, the bylaw wasn't included in that to support it. It was more infrastructure based. Just wondering the reasoning behind that.
Through the mayor, Councillor Chalmers, can you sort of say that again? I don't know if I understand correctly.
Back when you were saying what the revenue from the paid parking was going to go to, it was more based on infrastructure, like improving sidewalks and roads and all that. I was just surprised not to see bylaw support included in that.
Through the mayor, the intent, of course, is to fund the service itself, which would include enforcement.
Okay.
As well as programs and services definitely is the intention there, which would have been on some of my other slides. And I apologize if there was a misleading comment about only infrastructure. The intent is infrastructure, programs, and services.
Gotcha. Okay, thank you.
Councillor Anderson, if you have a question.
No questions, just some pitfalls I think I'd like to point out. I think over the years I've heard a lot of reaction about pay parking at the beaches, so I think we'll have some serious pushback about making the beaches first. But it's the comment I've heard in the past is that people shouldn't have to pay to go to the beach, but which they don't have to do if they don't bring a vehicle. But I think that's something we should be mindful of. I'm a little bit worried about, we have a parking problem on the highway as it is near the beach access points. So there may be some pay parking on the municipal roads near those access points might make that problem worse. So I'm not sure how we'll address that, but another pitfall. I think we need to step up our enforcement around parking for short-term rentals. I think some short-term rentals are using street parking when they're required to have off-street parking, and I think that needs to be brought into the mix. I think the success of the whole program is really going to depend on that link to where the revenue is going, and people really need to see that it's going to be tied to road improvements, future parking improvements. I keep hearing that we should have a large parking lot out of town for RVs with a shuttle service in, so that people can actually park outside of town and not bring their vehicles in. And I see that's a solution that other municipalities have put in place, the park and ride type situations. So I'd like to see somehow that sort of, maybe not implemented at first, but at least identified as one of the maybe goals for the future. And I think with those types of long-term solutions built into the plan and used for that revenue at the beginning are going to contribute a lot towards the success of implementing pay parking. I think that was all my points. I also keep hearing more about not allowing RV parking in town, so I hope that thought has come into play as well. So mainly comments, no questions. Oh.
Councillor Chalmers.
Yeah, one more question I just thought of. Has there been any thought about accessible parking? Would that be included, or would we give any breaks for that?
Through the mayor, the accessible parking has been discussed as to what's the right design of accessible parking. And we also have talked about equity issues when it came to different rates and how that might apply to a couple of different cases, whether that was low income, you know, different considerations that would apply to different user groups, including accessible needs. So I think as we move forward, those types of considerations, incentives, and sort of concessions need to be made to make sure that we don't disadvantage anyone by mistake or unintentionally, for sure.
Thank you.
Fraser, last question. When do you expect to bring this before council? Because I see this being a more contentious issue than beach fires, and we saw how that went.
Through the mayor, the intent was to see if we had support for moving forward on this, and then we would be releasing the RFP, and then we would be relying on a market response about both costs of these different programs, some different offerings about how to implement what we want to achieve, as well as the timelines to achieve that. So I would estimate that we'll be trying to move quite quickly on this file so that we have a chance of implementing, you know, in that sort of May-June timeframe, which would put us in a position to potentially report back to council with RFP results sometime on that sort of just the beginning of the Q2 boundary, or the just right, you know, at probably around that April timeframe. And I'm looking, I can now see Bob's face, seeing if he's nodding or shaking his head. But I think I would say we won't be. I don't think we'll be back in front of council in March unless it was more of a discussion about design and intent.
Okay, I think the sooner this gets before council, the better. We'll leave it up to you guys. Okay. Oh,
yeah, can I just want to make sure that, you know, we're going to be building a budget around implementing paid parking. So I think we're taking it, you know, forward today that we're good to do that and start taking steps to refine what the program will look like, as well as hear from the marketplace about what service they can offer for us at what price to support the implementation of pay parking, as Fraser has described. So, you know, if council is not wishing to go forward with pay parking, today it would be a really good day, or tomorrow would be a good day to let us know that. Otherwise, it's going to be, you know, the next discussions will be about how we refine it, not if we're doing it or not.
Oh, I think council is in favour of paid parking, but I think council knows the amount of stick we're going to get from the public, and the sooner we start dealing with these subjects, the better. I mean, when someone says to me that Howard Drive is a residential street and I only know 3 residents and the rest is all vacation rentals, I mean, that is not right. So I think March, April will be good. So as I say, for budget purposes, I think we're all prepared to move on with this. Any other questions? You have a hand up, Brett?
Yeah, I just wanted to say that I'm supportive, and I think the plan sounds good. And I don't think we'll get as much flack from the community as we would a few years ago. I think there's definitely been a shift there. And in comment to your Howard Drive, I think residents and vacation rentals have a right to park where they're staying as well. So I think it fits within that residential. So I think the plan so far is pretty sound.
We can debate this. You just heard someone say vacation rentals should park on the property. Anyway, let's move on.
Okay, thanks, Mayor and Council. I'll go back to my share screen option again here and get us back on the next slides. All right. Okay, that should be full screen again.
Yes, it is.
Okay, so the next two slides summarize the estimates that we made at the end of 2020 that looked at the revenue estimates for both the existing 3rd Street location as well as the other locations, and how those would be, the intent would be to actually make those revenues climb. These are also based on including the town estimates in the overall formula. So what we will see here is that we would have an overall decrease in expenses in 2021, and shifting some of those to the 2022 timeline if we do the phased approach and achieve some of those timelines I mentioned before. So this budget kind of reflects that all-in implementation in 2021. So we would see a kind of a parallel reduction in both overall revenues and potential overall expenses. That being said, if the beach parking revenues were conservatively estimated, and we do know, of course, through experience that those are in high demand and have the potential to gain potentially a little bit more than what we've estimated. So I think as we come forward with the next reports, the intention for staff would be to refine these estimates based on the phased approach we've discussed in the previous slides to get a bit more certainty about where the costs and the revenues will come. And then we will be, of course, monitoring that. We'll only learn what actuals once we get up and running. This slide was separate just in case we didn't go forward with the beach, with the parking improvements, and we had, the paid parking system, and we still had some infrastructure investments to make in order to improve safety and the conditions of the parking lots themselves. We've allocated a series of funds there across a few years on the beach parking area, which would include $100,000 in 2021 to invest in safety, lighting, electrical, bollard, signage, and paint repairs to make sure that we had adequate standards and safe standards at the parking locations. If you were to go right now to the Cox Bay Resort 1431 location, you'll see the electrical systems have been having to be isolated to make sure that there was no risk to the public because of the deterioration of some of those bollards. So we do have some work to do, and that's why this funding line is created. The asset management program includes both the overall corporate programming and then encompasses a discrete asset management activities across different asset classes. There is a slide here that breaks that down in a little bit more detail, but before I go to that, essentially what we've done is we've populated a 5-year program that digs in with a lot more planning and design work around our asset management program, with a focus on the corporate program development in the front end and the most high priority asset class asset management plan development, followed by the different asset classes in order of priority and maturity. That's broken down here in this chart, which shows in 2021 that program development at the top of the table with some condition assessments and safety assessments on the road network, water investment to make sure that we have the master plan and the asset management plan integrated so that we can build that sort of 30-year outlook on the water system, 20 to 30-year capital investment plan to follow. And then looking at getting on top of some of our buildings and structure assessments, doing in-house design of our fleet and equipment sort of asset management master plans, and moving out into the years as follows to make sure that we have strong plans to inform our budget processes, our risk management, our operations, and our maintenance processes. That slide has been before council in the late part of 2020, and what we've done here is we deferred a couple of areas like I&I and some of these other programs to the next years to give us a chance to dig in on and be a bit more realistic about what capacity we do or don't have and how long it's going to take us to build in certain areas, like where we don't yet have a manager in my group or some other key positions to help drive this program. The climate action project has been changed a little bit to reverse the order of what we think is the highest priority portions of our planning, which would include in 2021 focusing on climate adaptation strategy and risk management that would dovetail with the work that Aaron and his team have been doing on flood risk mitigation and some of the other areas that are subject to climate risks, and then follow in 2022 and splitting those tasks into 2 different years and reducing the 2021 in-year costs to make sure that we get on top of our GHG baseline and emissions inventory so that we can develop our risk management plan and our climate action plan from there. We will have a requirement in the out years to do a bit of analysis and modeling of where we're at to make sure that we have done our due diligence and we have a sound plan to reduce carbon in accordance with the federal and provincial mandates that have been set before us. So we want to make sure that we have a good plan to reach 2030 and then beyond. Council might remember that the plan put forward for consideration would be to invest in 4 level 2 EV chargers at the municipal hall parking lot location, which would attempt to attract more EVs to that location as premium parking available in the downtown core, and would be seeking opportunities for external contributions to help support a level 3 or DC fast charger here on Industrial Way, which would support our electric bus shuttle services. And those conversations, which April had mentioned before, were in discussion. So there are some grant opportunities there that April is investigating, and I'm working with her to support to make sure that we can potentially get that up and running in a manner that could even achieve a temporary installation or a in 2021 while we get ready to do a permanent installation. So we're talking to different service providers about units that they have that are semi-portable. And what we can achieve in 2021. So that would be subject to grant funding, and what we're asking here for is an RMI supported allocation of funds for 4 EV chargers, and then we'll work hard at that DC fast charger to support other needs. The zero waste program, since I last was in front of council, has been stripped back a little bit and deferred to other years. What we're proposing here is that in 2022 is to do a little bit more work on the zero waste strategy and pilot program trials if possible. And in 2021, focus on doing the minimum replacements for bins in the downtown that are required at locations like First Street Dock and a few other locations around town, as well as where we need additional dog waste bins. And then plan for a little bit more of a robust program to follow in 2022 and beyond. So really what we've done here is we've deferred some of those projects to the later years and focused on what are the minimum replacements required in 2021. The LED streetlight replacement project has also been recommended for deferral to 2022 to follow what BC Hydro will be doing in town on their own streetlight poles. And we would be looking at starting the design work and then the implementation in 2023 to make sure that we have implemented the LED lights, which will save us about 50% or more of our overall bill for streetlights, and has a payback period of potentially 6 to 9 years. I haven't done the assess. That's kind of the nominal payback, simple payback period for this work, and it reduces maintenance significantly for those systems and improves the safety and lighting around those areas while still meeting our dark sky and our privacy and light pollution targets, which would be looking at a warmer yellow or a 3000 K temperature of the lights themselves, completely in line with what Hydro is doing throughout the district on their own starting in late 2021. The MUP safety concrete delineators is a project that aims to replace the yellow wheel stops that are actually designed to be in parking lots for parking spots, and with a more robust concrete curb setup that would be able to provide a higher degree of safety for the vulnerable road user on the MUP, as well as maintaining drainage portals on the bottom of the concrete curbs to allow stormwater to still get back to the ocean and follow the drainage courses off of the highway. We're looking at potential sources through other grant opportunities, whether that's with the provincial government agencies or others. This project is right now recommended for funding through gas tax for our portion. And we would be looking at achieving as much as possible with what is now reduced to a 2021 contribution from gas tax of $50,000. I am going quite fast because I do have a lot of slides. So please, Council and Mayor, if you wish me to slow down or stop anywhere, please don't be shy. And I don't think and hope you won't. The road design projects in 2021 are listed on this slide, which intend to have design and shelf ready projects for the roads that we have to upgrade that we know are coming as part of either associated works on the fringes or underground utility works, where we want to be able to reconstitute the road in the right way once we've done some of that works, whether it's along Neil Street or the works that are going to happen as part of the wastewater treatment project. And we want to make sure that we're prepared to actually implement those designs with prudent designs and strong Class B or Class A estimates. That this work would be likely coupled in a single RFP, nested as a bundle, so that we can get as much flexibility and hopefully economies of scale with this work as we move forward. We've broken out Lynn and Chesterman Beach Road as a separate animal because it includes a little bit more complexity with respect to parking, drainage, as well as public engagement. The intent would be to do the Lynn Road and Chesterman Beach Road designs in 2021. Those roads are quickly deteriorating and are also in very, very high demand from a usage perspective from both tourism and community to access those beach locations, of course, as well as the residents and housing along those zones. But what we want to do is make sure that we consider some of the drainage, storm management, resilience and adaptation issues as it pertains to not just the road, but also the way that we move water in and around that area. Any parking design or road design will have a direct and meaningful impact on the way that we manage our stormwater here. And we will, these types of projects to design are not insignificant costs. Some of the 2013 estimates for Lynn and Chesterman Road were multi-million-dollar projects for just the road rehabilitation, which didn't include significant improvements to drainage or parking. Councillor, I think Anderson had mentioned the importance of being able to link costs to improvements. I think the Lynn and Chesterman Road, the intent we've talked about is that parking would be unavailable or restricted and would not be allowed on the overnights. It would be paid parking along these locations as well. And that revenue, if we didn't have a revenue source through parking usage throughout the year, the only source of funds to provide for this would be through our taxation mechanisms. And I think Nyla will talk a little bit more about that. So just as an example of very high capital costs and supported by revenues, which provides a direct benefit to our community. Mackenzie Beach Road improvements, as I mentioned before, is the source of a few background slides and a little bit more information when compared to the other slides in this slide deck. So what I'll intend to do here, Mayor McMaster, is I'll go through these slides and then I'll unshare my screen so that everybody can be back up and running and we can have a discussion as required. And then I'll jump back into the presentation for some of the storm drainage and the fleet in the final slides in this particular portion of my department. So Mackenzie Beach Road improvements, the design is now at about 80 or 90% design, and the cost estimate has been completed, which totals about $860,000 to implement this work. And this work is to improve the road substructure, which has a direct improvement to the road drainage, and the pavement itself, which has been the focus of a lot of our attention, of course, is to get pavement on that gravel road, and also to introduce a MUP along the northern portion of the Mackenzie Road right-of-way. This design is intended to achieve at least a 20-year lifespan, as we learned that based on the failing nature of the structure of that road with the decaying organics that sit underneath, is that if we just simply pave the road, we may only get 5 years of life out of that pavement before it had to be repaved again. And it would not take very long for those repavement exercises to cost more than the totals that you see before you here. So the strongest business case for this road staff would present is moving towards a 20-year lifespan road using some geotextile fabrics and cloths, a geogrid as it's called, through a proprietary company, which would remove a lot of the interventions that we would have to do to take material out of that infrastructure, but still give it that lifespan that we want by adding structural integrity to the road via this geogrid system. The the slides that I have right now talk a little bit about the design overview and what we're trying to achieve, and then some of the trade-offs and consideration that we felt most important to present to council as they deliberate this as a budget item based on its overall significant price tag. As I mentioned before, we're aiming to improve the road structure and its drainage and introduce a paved surface, a high quality paved surface, which includes room and right of way to support active transportation. The MUP will not be a terribly wide right of way because of the room that we have to manage in there, and the expense of adding additional width along the right of way would drive expenses beyond that 1 million mark. And we have to carefully balance both the width of the vehicle lanes to improve safety and slow down the traffic in there, but still make room for the cyclists and the pedestrians and make sure that they're safe. We will require, with this design of a 2 to 2.5 meter MUP, and we will settle on a design hopefully as near to 2.5 meter as possible. It will still require widening in certain spots, and we will cross 2 riparian streams and make sure that we can do so in a way that reduces risk but still achieving the ultimate goals. This will include traffic calming elements in the design, which may be a combination of speed bumps and nozzling, but it will be an essential part of the design because we do have excessive speeds in that area now, and we want to make sure that once we pave, they don't get worse, they get better. What council will see for the first time here today is a few concepts that we've floated back and forth between staff and consultant designers on what the end of the road concept could look like in the future. Because we want to make sure that whatever we design on the main road right of way now isn't subjected to a bunch of rework because we didn't think through what the end condition might be in years to come. All of these designs include and retain the MUP along the northern edge. They do add parking and beach access amenities for the public, which is subject to right of way legal access through ongoing negotiations or future negotiations with the adjacent landowners. The top image on the top right of your screen includes a series of public amenities like washrooms, parking, boulevard, bike racks, public waste receptacles, and has that skinny beach access that runs towards the beach, which would only be achievable to connect to the beach with rights over the land along that frontage. The next 2 pictures include right-of-way for motor vehicles and pedestrians that we do not currently own, again, in a more expansive way, but allow for more seamless travel of buses and larger vehicles in a roundabout type of fashion integrated with parking designs, which would require us to work out a whole bunch of challenges with the adjacent landowners that has not been subject to negotiations or discussions with those stakeholders yet and would require significant public consultation. The reason I've put this up here today is to provide council with a little bit of a crystal ball on where the Mackenzie right-of-way could evolve, and suggesting that if we wish to start to introduce more community benefits in an investment in Mackenzie Beach Road of $860,000, it is likely supportable that we have some more community benefits in our sites, as the Mackenzie Beach Road access currently as a right-of-way does not have a significant portion of community benefits like beach access to Mackenzie Beach or even access to parking to support Middle Beach visits. So what staff have been looking at here is how do we think about the future so that we make the right design choices now on investments with Mackenzie Beach Road, and how do we start to think about our planning towards things like this when it comes to land use negotiations that in some respects are currently underway and potentially available to us as we move forward. So going to the text on the slides, just to make sure that I haven't forgotten anything, the price tag on these different concepts is sort of round about $800,000 for the top one based on 2020 costs, and then about 15% or so extra for each additional treatment as you go down the pictures to a more comprehensive designs and more expansive designs. So again, not insignificant infrastructure investments, but as you'll see in my next slides, I think the considerations of overall community benefit and the price tags of $860,000 are important concerns for us to share and discuss at the district. So So some of the issues that I'd like to present to council as my discussion issues would be that we currently have low-level reserves in the roads areas to support these types of capital projects, just like the Mackenzie Beach Road improvements of pavement road structure and MUP additions, just like what was discussed at Lynn Road and Chesterman, and the other roads that we of course wish to improve, like Sharp and Arnett and different roads throughout our district. The implementation of the Mackenzie Road project will all but eliminate our road reserve and put us into a save for future projects posture, which we assess right now is it would remove the opportunity for us to do any major road projects over the next 5 years if we did Mackenzie Road now without additional funds. We of course wish to seek external funding sources wherever possible through grants or other avenues, and we will continue to do so no matter what. The road priorities, as a staff person, I wish I had in my hands a modern and updated set of road condition assessments and a modern and updated set of road priorities that we felt very confident in using to guide our investments, and that does not exist. We have a 2013 assessment of road condition that did not necessarily prioritize based on the benefits that those road projects would provide our community or other users. We want to have a more comprehensive discussion as roads as an asset class, and we want to be able to say that we recommend doing it in this order of priority because of these factors, because of these cost considerations, benefits, and consequences. And we want to move to that priority list as part of our asset management planning, which is recommended as a 2021 activity to get to that road priority list. But without that road priority list, it becomes very difficult as a staff person to say that I can support fully the recommendation to move forward with the Mackenzie Beach Road project, albeit that project was in the financial plan before I arrived. But my point there is, without understanding the other priorities, it's difficult to support a recommendation for an investment of $860,000. And it is informed by some of these discussion items. The public amenities that I discussed was we would hope to build a beach access to Mackenzie Beach Road. As it currently sits, is mainly a tourism amenity, but it does provide some public benefits of paving that surface and reducing the dust, reducing the gravel maintenance that we have to do on almost a bi-weekly basis, and reduces some nuisance concerns for any users that work, play, or frequent that do live and are part of our community. And we would additionally start to work towards some of those community benefits when we plan for Mackenzie Beach Road investments. So in summary, it has a high price tag. The business case I would assess is weak, because of the lack of community benefit. But we have also had this project on the books for a significant amount of time, and I do assess that people are tired of that road being in such poor state, and that there are many people that even without that community benefit of beach access or access to some of those other amenities, they would still support, and rightly so, an improvement in that zone. We for sure have to move forward on our condition assessments and our prioritization scheme. We have to consider and be very mindful that we have been working at building the reserves in this area, which would be exhausted in a large part by this project. So my recommended way forward here is that we based on the promise and the fact that this has already been established as a council priority, and I have no information today or as of yet that suggests that priority has changed, that we move ahead with delivering this project. We do complete smartly the condition and roads assessment and the prioritization. We continue to negotiate and try to gain those community benefits wherever possible. And that's partnering up, of course, with Aaron and his department to make sure that we keep stepping through those discussions expeditiously. We look at the future to introduce parking revenues to support mobility infrastructure investments of this kind. And we, of course, seek any opportunities to gain external funding to support these types of projects. That's my last slide on this one, and I'll just exit here quickly and stop sharing so that if there is a discussion, it can happen with everybody's view on the screen. Thank you.
Thanks, Fraser. I think everybody's okay for having some questions, and then we probably should adjourn for the night and continue tomorrow, as some people wanted to finish at 7. Councillor Anderson.
Yeah, thank you, Fraser. I'm curious, do we know offhand what it costs to maintain Mackenzie Beach Road on an annual basis right now? It's probably into the tens of thousands just to keep it graded in as level as possible.
It's a fabulous question, and definitely one that I want to be able to answer a bit more robustly in the future through the mayor. Excuse me. The cost for us to maintain Mackenzie Beach Road are a combination of equipment, staff time, and materials. The cost that we track most closely when it comes to allocation of Mackenzie Beach Road improvements is the gravel costs. We on a single major improvement last year when we had very bad potholes and we lost a significant amount of material, and there is really no material to grade. I think we spent about $10,000 on that single evolution, but most other evolutions are mostly just staff time and using, you know, a sub $1,000 amount of gravel to get in there. But we did a significant lift in that area once in 2020. If I had to tell you what my best guess was at this time, I would say that we would be spending near $20,000 in 2021 just to maintain status quo.
Thanks. That's all I have right now.
Okay, Councillor Stair had his hand up.
Thank you, Fraser. That was comprehensive on Mackenzie. I will have to echo some of the sentiments that you brought forward with my concerns around the costs of the Mackenzie Road improvements, based mostly on the facts of what you brought up quite articulately, is in terms of the community benefits that are come from there. There's limited residential that is down on that road, and it is mostly in terms of the accommodation sector where those improvements would have the most benefit, in my opinion, at this point. And so when I look at the prioritization of where we're going to allocate a huge chunk of our reserve funds in there, it does cause me concerns. And not having a long history of the prioritization of Mackenzie Road in the past. I've only been on council for 2 years. And those discussions, it has always left a very difficult taste in my mouth. And I don't know how we address that at this point in the budget process, but I have to definitely voice my concerns about using that amount of our reserves for what I perceive as in terms of, for me, a prioritization is very low. And I don't know where to go with that. I'd love to hear the rest of council, because Councillor Anderson and McMaster have experienced longer time with the Mackenzie Road issue. But I'll leave it at that for now. And I'd like to hear Councillor Chalmers what she has to say as well too on this one.
Councillor Chalmers.
Sure, I have a few thoughts on that. I think it's really important that we don't forget that there is actually a fairly significant residential base there in the staff accommodations, and those are part of our community. And I think it tends to get forgotten as they are on site with 2 resorts down there. I also have a lot of firsthand experience with that road, as I used to work down there. So I would drive it about 4 times a day, and there was constant foot traffic and bike traffic being covered in the dust. So there's that health concern that whether it's our residents, our staff accom, our tourists, or our locals residents in the surrounding areas that do tend to cut through that area to the beach. I know there is all of those different people using that, as well as I worry about the environmental impacts of the riparian there, with the consistent amount of dust and gravel that's been put on there, sloughing off over the decades of its use. So things that are, well, I understand the concerns about it and the cost. I've definitely been very supportive of this, even though I don't work there down there anymore.
Well, I think Councillor Stair has reinforced a lot of the arguments that Councillor Anderson and I have heard in the past, and I think this will be an ongoing debate. With regards to that road, and we keep on talking about thinking, 20 years ahead, so something is, worth doing. I know a MUP is better than no MUP, but I know people now are talking about having MUPs wider than 2.5, 3 meters because of the increase in e-bikes. So if you're going, is there a space to accommodate that if we ever, if we're going to think that far ahead?
Through you, Mayor McMaster, the discussions about the narrowness of the MUP have been raised as a concern at the staff level for exactly those reasons. As we move forward, we have a couple of options. We could invest in widening that road further, which comes at quite a significant civil expense. That intervention is quite severe. And a bit more cost effective would be a shared road design, which is a certified design treatment where you can actually have bicycles in lane with traffic. But in order to do that, you need to slow traffic down to below 30 kilometers an hour. And you need to have traffic volumes below nominally 1,000 vehicles per day. You can do that by treating the road with different traffic calming elements, constraining the vehicle road users to go very slow, not just signposting, but of course physical treatments to make sure that that speed is supported and actualized. That type of facility exists in many urban centers where you have where you can achieve those types of speeds and volumes. And then what you do is you put the bikes safely in with traffic, and everybody crawls down the right of way. It gets challenged a little bit on Mackenzie because you have very large vehicles in many respects accessing the campgrounds. So sight lines and visibility become some concerns, but it is technically achievable and has been done in many locations on the island as well as throughout North America. The MUP portion of this design is currently recommended for funding from 2020 RMI assets and aren't necessarily drawing specifically on the CNI levies or the roads reserves. So in this case, NILA has worked with April to come up with a way to fund this that reduces that overall impact on taxation or the reserves themselves. But the MUPS does have a proportional price tag associated with the design. And there is of course options to remove that from the design, but that does come with safety impacts and implications that then have to be managed. Of course, as Councillor Chalmers mentioned, that there's higher desire lines for pedestrian and bike access in there, and if that happens without a pedestrian amenity, you have to attune for it and manage those risks in different ways, which is difficult.
Yeah. Okay, I mean, for budget purposes, I have a hard time with this one for 2021. I'd like to hear what Councillor Anderson thinks.
Yeah, I agree. It's a really difficult one now that the prices come up from the last estimate we got on Mackenzie, and then the amount that it depletes our reserves. But I'd like to sort of know, and this will take a little bit of investigation or analysis to know, like, at what point are we going to be happy that our reserves are enough to do that road? And we put off last year to avoid or to try and cut taxes as much as possible. We put off our infrastructure levy, and so that, I mean, that contributed to the fact that our reserves are low. There's been years and years and years before that of no infrastructure levy in place. So it's kind of an accumulated problem that we're facing now, that we haven't been building reserves adequately over the years to replace and to address infrastructure problems as the need arises. I keep having to, not to defend, but to point out that those users, be it commercial users for tourism, are paying taxes. And they've been paying taxes for more than 20 years on a very poor road and service to their properties. And all those tourists are contributing through the taxes charged to those people. So it's not as if it's the residents only paying for that. And so I try to remind myself of that, because it's easy to get into that mode of thinking that 2,000 people that live here are the only people contributing to the tax base. So I think that's one thing that should be kept in mind. Having said that, I need a bit more analysis of where our infrastructure levy is going, and so to make that final call on whether this would be in or out or partly in this year and partly in next year's budget, I kind of need that that sort of snapshot too. And if it leaves our levies, our reserves depleted, it's going to leave it depleted in another year when it does happen. And if we're not going to do Mackenzie Beach, we're going to have to make that decision, because those reserves are going to be quickly needed by some other infrastructure upgrade. So if I guess that's the analysis we need, and we need to know, you know, what are we putting off if we go with Mackenzie now? Does that mean that Lynn Road is off 5 years, or something else is off 5 years, or does that mean we need to increase our contribution through the infrastructure and levy to reserves? So it's more than just saying, oh, that's for tourists, we can leave it. There's a bit more analysis, although that's what we're going to hear from those that live here, I know. Okay, that's my comment.
Okay, I see Niall has just popped up, so perhaps we'll let her speak before we go to Councillor Steer. Do you want to say something, Niall?
I was actually going to pass it just to Fraser first before I talk about funding, because some of those comments did have to do with priorities, and I just wonder if he has some comments on that first.
Through the mayor, and thanks, Nyla. Yeah, I think, of course, we also want to be able to answer that question about what are the options before us, and it's really difficult to answer when we don't have a condition assessment and a list of priorities. Ideally, we would have a list of agreed priorities that were well substantiated, and we would have a funding set of funding sources and potential funding, and we would be able to see how far down that list can we get over a certain period of time. I know Nyla has a lot more sophisticated understanding of how the mechanics of those types of things will work, but I think what I am recommending is as stated to deliver in 2021 that prioritization list, so that we can actually move with a little bit more certainty through these types of projects and fund and seek to allocate fundings with a little bit more certainty as well. Thanks, Nyla.
And I can speak quickly to the funding aspect of this, and I agree, Councillor Anderson. It is a result of many things, and one of them is that we haven't been collecting the levy for a very long time. If you have a look at how long the infrastructure has been in the ground, so we are disadvantaged by that. Another thing is that we have not progressed our asset management planning practices beyond what's required right now for renewal of existing assets. We do need to predict what we need to add in the future to accommodate growth and to accommodate expansion of our infrastructure. So this is a road where we would be expanding our asset. We would be making it more than what it is now. So we do have the ability to use some DCCs for this project, but it's also renewal of an existing asset. So we are using some capital and infrastructure levy funds for that. Because we haven't been collecting for so long, we are going to find ourselves in a situation maybe in 5 years or 10 years or at the time where we need to renew a road, where we're not going to have enough money. And we may need to borrow. We may need to take advantage of grant opportunities a couple years earlier than renewal, or hang on a couple years longer after the service life by patching and repairing, so we can wait for a grant opportunity. But with roads, we just don't see a lot of grant opportunities come our way. And that was certainly worked into our CNI, our investment plan model, in that asset category, and we put that at a high risk component, and we made sure we didn't reduce in that area for what we need to save and collect. So from an investment side of things, we are working as quickly as we can to build up our reserves, but we're just not at a place right now where we can confidently say, let's move forward with an $800,000 project, knowing that there are other priorities, and we need to get some clarity on what those priorities are, so that we can confidently come forward and recommend and have a better idea of what the future looks like.
Does that answer your question, Councillor Anderson? Councillor Steer, do you have anything to add?
Yeah, it was just, I think it was answered both by Nyla and by Mr. Work. It had to do for me with the prioritization, the condition assessment and prioritization of that road infrastructure, so that we have an understanding of where best to allocate those limited resources that we have right now. So if we're looking at an $800,000 project on a very low priority issue in terms of either condition assessment or what we prioritize going forward, it would make sense to me that without that information, it'd be hard for me to support moving ahead on a project of this magnitude without understanding at what scale this is at in terms of priority. So that was the only comment I made, and I think Fraser alluded to that, and then Nyla in terms of the actual dollars amount that'll be allocated. So thank you. That's all I had to say.
Yeah, I think you're sort of hearing that this project should be deferred to a later year. Any, Mr. McPherson?
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, this is the discussion that's happening now with council very much mirrors the discussion that your senior staff have had about this road, where on the one hand, it's really quite something in a world-renowned resort. There's a gravel road that accesses a significant chunk of our accommodation, and that's just kind of the look and feel isn't that great. One thing that hasn't come up yet is the community that we keep telling each other we aspire to be, and comments earlier about RVs not coming downtown and encouraging active transportation. This is an impediment to that, and as much as it does benefit a particular set of land users at the end of that road, it also, seeing that road paved also benefits the larger community, as we can then more rightly encourage people to leave their RVs at the campsite and use the bus. We stopped running the bus down that road a few years ago because it was just too hard on equipment. So people are walking up and down the road, as Councillor Chalmers has said. It does hold us back from doing some of the things that we say we want to do. That said, this is one of those ones where there's just no right answer, and it's we appreciate that this is a tough one for council.
Yeah, I just think 2021 is going to be a tough year for everybody, and I just can't support spending that money in 2021. Anyone else from council want to chip in?
Yeah, well, I think I made it clear without having a firm understanding of what the priority areas are, and I do respect Mr. McPherson's comments. In the timeframes that we're looking at, it's hard for me to give the type of support for this particular project, and I know this has been going down the road for a long time. No pun intended. Actually, pun intended. But the reality right now is that we are facing, and I think what Acting Mayor McMaster is saying is that there's a little uncertainty still out there in terms of our understanding of the priorities for this particular type of work. This may not be the time to move forward with this, but that's my opinion.
Councillor Chalmers?
I'm supportive of moving forward with it for the reasons I said earlier, as well as I think just putting off it is also just going to increase the cost down the road, as we've seen with previous things that have been put off throughout the years. And I think it is a priority. I think there's a lot of good reasons to keep going for it, and it's not great how expensive it is, but it's only going to get worse.
Councillor Anderson for a last word.
Yeah, I'm a little reluctant to move forward at this time, but really we got to get our ducks lined up to do it next year. It's been a long time coming. I do hear from the few residents that do live down there about the dust problems, and that spills right across the street, right over into the subdivision across the highway from there. Wind conditions are right. The dust is everywhere down there. So it's just difficult to deplete the reserves so much for one project in 1 year. So and also I'd like to see more. I'd like to see that road assessment come forward, and we could do a bit more prioritization around it, around all the things that are needed. And I was kind of more hopeful that we'd have a little bit better, or be further down the road with negotiating with the landowners down there to know what might be possible to improve amenities as well. But this is where we are right now. So those are my comments.
So Bob, how do we resolve this? We have a 2-2 split.
You're muted.
You're muted.
I believe Councillor Chalmers seems to be the only one in favor of going forward this year. So we have 3 councillors who are saying let's defer this. I wonder if we leave the money in the reserves. Engineering and Public Works have done good work developing a design and getting cost estimates. The money stays in, and Nyla can kick me under the table here, but the money stays in reserves. And if we are able to find other funding sources or build a more compelling case, then and it just seems like, well, that's just the best thing in the world to do in September, then we can come back to council with a budget amendment that would maybe draw on the reserves less, and perhaps in the interim we have that road plan that we were talking about in the last little while.
Well, I think that sounds reasonable to me. I think Councillor Anderson was actually leaning to going ahead after a little while, but
at one point it seemed.
Yeah. But I'm happy to defer it. Yeah. So do we need to vote on this or anything? Or yes. Have you listened to everything we had to say?
Maybe I'll just be more clear. I'm okay with deferring it to 22, but really I don't want to leave it like 5 years down the road. But yeah, it's a problem that needs to be solved, and the sooner the better. Yeah.
Okay, so I think it's clear we're prepared to defer this project. I have another question. This is the. Do we have any more questions? I have a couple of questions myself that aren't related to the Mackenzie Beach project. On the EV chargers, I was surprised today to hear a report that only 10% of vehicles will be electric by the year 2030. So I'm in favour of EV chargers. I just wondered, at the same time these have been installed, and I know it's different sort of charger, whether we should be looking at having an electric bike charger at the same time, and wondered what the incremental cost on that would be. You don't have to answer it now. I just would like to hear sometime in the future.
Understood.
And my second question, just for information, a lot of regarding the LED lighting, I know a lot of municipalities now are looking at getting less bright LED lights. I'd be interested to know what the actual lumens of the LED lights are that we're planning. in the sense, I know I've had a few complaints about the lights at Lynn Road and the highway there being too bright. So it'd be interesting. I know we're saying the dark sky lights, but I'd be interested to know what the actual lumens were for the lights. If you could find that out for me sometime in the future, that'd be great.
Sure. Mayor McMaster, I can kind of comment a bit now. So the parameters that we normally coordinate or control on the lights is going to be the wattage as well as the temperature. Though, as you know, when you go pick up an LED light bulb, it gives you an indication of what the alternative incandescent would have been as far as wattage, just so that you can get a handle on what it'll look like and how much glare or how much light it'll throw. When we measure light on the ground and how much output that luminaire might have, we often talk about the lumens or the power there. One thing that's a bit difficult is that in some cases the light you're replacing was already overpowered. You didn't need that much wattage. So if you did a light study, you would actually go down in wattage, but maybe see the same temperature. The 3000, the lights on the highway are not 3000 Kelvin. They're a bluer light. They're probably 4000 or 5000 Kelvin, which has better color rendering and is better from a safety perspective, not unlike this crazy fluorescent behind me here, which is probably about 5000. Great for safety, not aesthetically pleasing, maybe great for surveillance, that kind of thing, but not necessarily in a residential community. So the 3000 has emerged as a temperature that's a lot more aesthetically pleasing, and it's very similar to what the high pressure sodium lights right now kick off at about 2700 Kelvin. So it's a better match, but not as red. So I think as we move forward, part of the design work we wanted to do was to make sure that we had the right power output, which was going to be the lumens was one way to, I guess, describe that, and make sure that we had the right setup for those types of concerns of safety and aesthetics. One of the bigger complaints that we see in neighborhoods that introduce LED lighting is the guards that are required. The LED lights actually do have some spill where the light's not intended to go into that basement suite across the road or whatever, and we can put guards on those Cobra heads to stop that light from polluting into the areas where you don't want it. And we saw in Victoria when we did this, when we introduced these lights, that we were able to quickly get out there and deploy the guards to make sure that the neighbors weren't seeing a lot of light pollution that they had been seeing from the high pressure sodium, but it was redder, so it didn't seem as intrusive or obscene. So we definitely will be controlling those types of things as we move forward, and we'll learn a little bit from the hydro installations as well, and we'll have a chance to give them feedback about what's working and what's not.
Okay, that sounds good. I know the municipalities I'm referring to, they're presently at 4000 lumens and are looking at moving down to 3000, so I'm happy with that. Is there any more questions before we adjourn for the night?
So just to finish off on Mackenzie Beach, what we're going to do is push this to 2022. I think that's the direction that we have from council, and then of course it's up for discussion again next year. But and we'll have more information at that time.
Okay, Councillor Chalmers.
Does that include Mr. McPherson's potential with keeping in reserves and looking at future grants?
The reserves that we have spoken about, I mean, that they will continue to be there, and if there are some other funding opportunities, and timing is of the essence with those, then we would. I think we're hearing from council. Yeah, it's a good project. It's the numbers. So if we can find a way to chip away at that number, then we would be back to council.
Okay. Anything else from anybody? Well, I'd just like to thank all the presenters today, and then I'd just like to get a motion to adjourn. Councillor Chalmers, Councillor Steer. Well, thanks everybody, and we'll see you tomorrow.